Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a time capsule episode of The Say Report. I'm Devin Decker. We'll get to the other guy in a bit, but first, before we go any further, I want to take you back to 1993. The year is 1993. You are Robert Reiner. You are riding the high of Best Picture nomination for A Few Good Men after Best Actress nomination for Misery in 1993 years earlier. And you're the guy who did The Princess fucking Bride. Plus, you were on All in the Family, and by all accounts, you're one of the only things that aged well. Now, you are so synonymous with creating films that are adaptations of Stephen King's work. Your production company is named Castle Rock. Frank Darabont has written a script adaptation of The Shawshank Redemption, and of course, you are the #1 choice to direct that film. Even if you do want Tom Cruise in it. It makes sense. He was just in A Few Good Men for you. But Frank Darabont decides, you know what? I think this is going to be the first time I direct the film. And you're Rob Reiner. You were in Mixed Nuts, right? You've seen Nora Ephron naked, probably. And what you're thinking to yourself is, all right, if Frank Darabont's going to go off and make the best film ever made, according to IMDb, as it's been at the top of the 250 for like ever over there, I'm going to go and make myself a little fable. And I'm going to try, if possible, to make the absolutely worst film ever made. And that film is North. And this time capsule episode of the Say Report, we're looking at the 1994 film North, starring Elijah Wood, and I guess Bruce Willis? But before we go any further with the discussion, Viva La Norte, the other guy, I said we'd get to him, is Sejan Serowick. Sejan Serowick, how you doing, my friend? Thank you for sitting there quietly, muted probably.
You just told a parable, a story, a series of events that made just as much sense to me as this movie did. Like, the ways in which you captured the storytelling concept of this film. And I'm not going to lay this at the feet of, like, Rob Reiner and be like, this is how Rob Reiner makes movies. No. That's the problem that I have with this movie. I have no idea where this movie came from, because in general, there are a lot of people doing stuff in this movie that they don't normally do. And I don't know why they chose to do it. Like, in fact, you mentioned Bruce Willis, and he might be the only person in this movie that I watched what he did in this movie and went, I get where that comes from for Bruce Willis. I don't understand what Reiner was doing. I don't understand what Elijah Wood's doing with his choices. I don't know what Jason Alexander and Julie Louis-Dreyfus, like the Seinfeld movie we never knew we had the whole time.
I mean, I knew. Here's the thing. Everything you're saying is right, but before we get too far down the line, I have two things that we need to address. Technically, three things that we need to address, but two of them are on my side. First of all, I am drinking an Arizona hard iced tea. It is the green tea ginseng honey. Is delicious, and I'm probably going to talk about them in like the episode proper that we're recording after we record this time capsule episode. But you know, it's a fun little callback from the future to the past. It's weird what I'm doing, but I have to say, the Arizona iced tea guy, he's like, I'm never going to raise the prices of my $1 cans of tea because I'm making enough money with them at $1. How much do you think a 12-pack of the hard Arizona iced tea costs, Sejan?
I mean, the second booze is involved, I imagine that goes up to regular pricing, right? So probably like $18-20 for a 12-pack.
It was $14.
All right.
So the tea was still $1 a can, and then it was a $2 booze tax. I'm on board, Arizona.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Oh, yeah, Arizona.
The second thing I have to say is actually related to the film North, and that is the fact that aside from the glaring issues, which I'll sum up with Kathy Bates and Brownface, I actually really enjoyed this film.
Now, let's not just look again. I'm not going to just point to Kathy Bates again, doing something completely out of character for Kathy Bates.
Well, at least we know why she did it, but we'll get there. We will definitely get there eventually.
But I want to point out in that exact same scene, you also have Abe Vigoda doing the exact same thing.
To be fair, though, Abe Vigoda's just playing an old motherfucker there. I don't even think that he's meant to be
still in
Inuit.
brownface.
I'm
pretty sure they still put makeup on him.
Yes,
in order to,
but I mean,
yeah.
it is.
So there's some glaring issues with this film.
Yeah, there are. But before we get to the glaring issues of this film, Sejan brought something up in our personal conversation today. And Sejan, since this is a time capsule episode of the Say Report being recorded on 8/16/24, some nerd just had an orgasm, and God bless them. Do you want to put your theory for Dr. Doom into this time capsule, so like years later when it's revealed, you can be like, oh, I fucking said it on 8/16/24.
Yeah, sure. Let's put it to tape, right? Let's seal this envelope and mail it to ourselves. We have talked recently in universe on the show, and I'm sure that it's a continuing conversation, even if this doesn't come out for months or, God, I'd be surprised more than that. But anyway, no, we've been talking about the recent reveal of Robert Downey Jr. I was going to say reprising his role, which is not, we don't know, right? But being recast in the MCU as one Doctor Doom, right? And the obvious next leap that everybody then make is like, oh my God, Tony Stark, they're going to do like an alt universe, because that's all they're doing right now, all multiverse, right? They're going to do a multiverse, alt-verse version of Tony Stark becoming Doom. And I want to make it clear that I still stand by everything that I have said, and I hope I am still saying to this day, is that it's not what I want, and I don't think that's what they're going to do, because that just seems too much, right? Like that's way too much shooting themselves in the foot, even for Disney. But as we all know, there's no limit stupidity can ever not transcend, right? But this idea being that it is possibly Tony Stark became a little bit more real to me today, and this is what Devin is referring to what I said to him.
Yeah.
Is I pointed out that there is a pretty smooth transition that they could probably that's not maybe the right word to use, easier transition for them to take in the Tony Stark to Doom concept, in that if they just do an alternate universe version of Tony who survives the snap. If that is a concept, that this is what happens if Tony snaps at the end of Endgame and survives, what does he become? And that being the idea that that's the path they go on with Doom. And this aligns with some stuff that Dev mentioned in some of the more recent episodes, in which we talked about the idea that it doesn't actually seem like Doom is going to be involved in the Fantastic Four movie at all, which is wild because of how often in at least film media, Doom is associated so heavily with the creation of that. And I mean, in the comics, that doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from the comics. But like I pointed out, not all Doom stories have to involve the Fantastic. There's plenty of great Doctor Doom stories that don't necessarily involve the Fantastic Four that I would love to see them do.
Which to say,
and so
the Spider-Man arcade game, Doctor Doom is the main enemy of that arcade game. And who would have
separated from like heroes? Like Doom has his own kind of concepts and stories that are really interesting to explore.
Doom 2099 is excellent. One of my favorite.
So there's
2099s.
There's an entire well of Doctor Doom concepts that they could dip into and honestly never have to touch the Fantastic Four. So if they go down this path, this gives them a nice, real easy way, because the other thing is Fantastic Four is being supposedly set back in the past, right? To have their Fantastic Four movie and eat it too, right? Like, as they get to talk about, like, the Fantastic Four movie, Doom's not involved with them because Doom is this character that we then know 50 years later is created in this fashion. It's not a happy thought, Dev. I don't know why you asked me to repeat it. We blatantly were talking about the idea of how we both were disgusted by how much I even said it.
Right, but also, I would like to have recorded evidence. If we were doing a regular episode of the show, I don't think I would have brought it up. It is specifically because we have this Friday energy going into this time capsule. We're going to talk about Rob Reiner's North. And I thought,
you just don't want to talk about North.
Oh, I want to talk the fuck about North. Are you kidding me? I just realized that I wanted to put into the time capsule my Arizona hard iced tea story, and I wanted to make sure that my feelings about North before we started this were known. But then I'm like, well, I'm putting things in that are like specific to Devin. CJ should get to put in like a rock or something. And I thought, what better rock than Tony snapped to destroy Thanos, lived, but it fucked up his face, forcing him to wear a metal visage instead. And then he hates himself so much.
I mean, let's go the full step further. It fuses the armor to him.
Oh, I
right?
love it.
Like this,
I love it.
Like this, yeah. That's what I'm saying, right? Is like this is it. This is the MCU writers' room as we imagine it right now, right? Is how do we make Tony Stark into Doctor Doom? And like, right, this is the concept. This is the conversation, right? Like, there's this idea that
this movie's gonna come out, and a special thank you to Siege and Sarawik for solving our Doctor Doom problem.
Solving. Yeah. Yeah, I don't love it. Again, I want to make sure that it's clear that I'm not saying this because this is what I want to happen. This is just, to me, if we see them go down this path, like of turning Stark into the Doom character, then I can see where the writers will probably go with it. So, like, it's me calling a shot, but it's like me not wanting to be playing the game. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about North.
No. But I have one other thing to say about Doctor Doom.
And child murderers and.
I just want to say, I can't wait for him to have that mask fused to his face, and Morgan comes in, and he's all sad and depressed because he saved the world, but he lost his face. And she's like, I love you 3,000, Daddy. And he's like, I hate you 3,000. And then that's what makes him become truly Doom. But yeah, child murderers. Where are we getting to child murderers? Oh, that's right. What's his name's son is in this movie. The guy from The Godfather, right? Is that his dad?
No. I mean the last 20 minutes of this film where there is a man chasing Elijah Wood with a handgun and shoots at him more than once and finally successfully.
I mean, in his opinion. I mean, that guy, I think we're talking about the same thing, because who we're talking about is, oh my God, he's so far down the cast list of this 99 plus.
Well, you can't reveal
movie.
who the big villain is, right?
Right. That's funny. That's a funny thing you just said. What the frick is his name? The real villain is Richard Belzer, but we'll get there. Robert Costanzo. Is his father not the guy who plays in The Godfather?
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, probably.
One would imagine, right? Like Carmine Costanzo is his father. No, he is a different person. He is known for the film With Friends Like These in 1998, but he died in 1997. Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm having fun because we're talking about North. Yeah, there's child murder. Here's how we're going to start the North discussion. We're having the North discussion. I think that this is an important part, like why we're talking about North. It's not just that it's the 30th anniversary. It's that, oh God, what's the hell's the name of the company that's doing the Cowboys of Moo Mesa toys? Nacelle. They just did the Biker Mice from Mars toys, which if this releases in August, which I hope it fucking doesn't, the Biker Mice from Mars figures are at Walmart's from Nacelle Toys. So it looked like it was going to be just an online thing, and no, they've been picked up for distribution in retail stores, which is huge, especially because Nacelle Toys is also going to be doing a line of Ryan Browns, a.k.a. I'm Ryan Brown, the impetus behind character Crying Hound in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures from Archie Comics. His Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa, COW, of course, standing for Code of the West. And my biggest memory about the Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa is the Konami game that in all ways, shapes, and modes is just a sequel to Sunset Riders, but with them as cows. Yeah, because that video game shows up into Movie North. I've only seen the arcade cabinet one time in my life. It was when I was in Nolans for Mardi Gras at 7, so there was nothing for me to do. I'll just be honest with you. I collected beads for the novelty, for no other reason. And that video game, I played it, and it was the only time I played it, and I loved it, and then I didn't see it again until 3 years later when I was sitting in the Gardner Cinema, and I was watching the Movie North.
I mean, yeah, so I love that this is your connection to it, but I mean, like, I feel like we needed to talk about this movie because we would be remiss if in not addressing a film of this infamy coming out in 1994, a year that we have noted many times as being an extremely important year in film for us, like you and me, as like people growing up in the world, but also kind of like
for the world,
in, like cinema. Yeah. Right. This is the year of the 3 Jim Carrey movies, right? Like this is the year
and the
where,
2 Jeff Daniels movies.
Right. Like we have talked about, like, this is like 94, like early 90s really in general, it encapsulates a kind of sense of filmmaking and cinema that I think everybody nowadays, when we talk about like nostalgia for like the golden age of cinema, I think this is it, right? Like the 80s kind of captures a bunch of those movies that influences what we want to see in movies now. But the 90s and the ways in which you could make anything and try everything. Anybody got the money to make a movie. Any movie could get a green light in the 90s, it feels like, right? Obviously there's counterexamples to that, but like that feeling, that sensibility that movies could be anything. And the fact that that is what we are not seeing nowadays, every movie is the same movie, every movie is a Marvel movie, that sense, what people are aching for is this era of filmmaking. Because North is not just talking about family films of 1994. The audience, I think, this movie is geared to, that's a different that's another conversation.
Huge conversation, yeah.
But this idea that North is PG, right? It's not G,
definitely PG.
Yeah, so it's a PG film, right? So it is
don't
built
shoot at
to
kids
service
in non-PG movies.
right. But there is but it is built to service a certain audience, at least in theory. And this year, 1994, is the year where we see Angels in the Outfield. We see Little Giants. We see the Little Rascals movie, which is funny because they straight up make a Little Rascals joke in this movie. Were they taking a swing? I don't know. But we also see a bunch of Don Bluth this year. Yeah. Troll in Central Park. Was Thumbelina Don Bluth? I don't remember.
Thumbelina is Don Bluth, but it's also 92. Because Thumbelina's not 94, is it?
Thumbelina, 1994, wow. American independent animated musical directed by Don Bluth and Gary Goldman.
Well, that's my favorite one because he went out and got the voice actor of Ariel to play Thumbelina.
Nice.
Like, Don Bluth is a fucking asshole. I love him. Like, you
We've
understand?
talked about the Flintstones movie.
Yes.
That's this year, right?
Oh.
We've talked about the Mighty Ducks. D2 is this year, right? Miracle on 34th Street is this year, and I only mentioned that one because one of the big things about Miracle on 34th Street is that's the movie that introduced, that's first of all, John Hughes, I believe, is the one that makes that one, right?
Yeah. I bet you're about to say Mara Wilson.
Yeah. So that's who, so that introduces me to Mara Wilson, who is in, I think, the better version of North, which is Matilda 2 years later in 1996.
I'm so happy that you and I both got to the fact that Matilda is this film's weird movie twin. I mean, by the definition of movie twin...
Yeah. The actual movie twin that this has, and just sticking to 1994, the true movie twin, I think, is the Macaulay Culkin-led Richie Rich film of 1994. Richie Rich.
I would always I always think of Blank Check as the movie twin of Richie Rich. Are we talking about a triplet situation, Sejan?
It might even be a triplet situation. I'm willing to let Blank Check in the room. But also Macaulay Culkin's also just having a big year because this is also the year of Page Master, right? So that's also the other reason why I probably really lean into Macaulay Culkin. But the big thing about Richie Rich, right? And the reason why I compare the two,
I don't mean to Zach Morris time out you. The reason you lean into Macaulay Culkin is because Macaulay Culkin was with Elijah Wood in The Good Son. That's why. That's
Well,
subconsciously.
I also spent the entire time watching this movie thinking of the Home Alone films, right? There is, because you've got the child actor like era going on right now too,
Yeah.
right? But the big reason why I think Richie Rich and this
by the
movie
way.
really kind of need to lean into, like, we need to. I couldn't help but think about the two, is that what this movie is about a young spoiled kid learning about his privilege and having to come to terms with the fact that, like, part of growing up is learning that sometimes the things that, like, upset us or we feel constricted by are actually like boundaries that establish us as, like, good humans, right? Like, without these kinds of boundaries we risk becoming villains, right? And that is, like, the whole Richie Rich film to a fucking T. That, but like the film itself, but also in general, like, conceptually, a lot of the stories you see with Richie Rich, right? So, like, it's this really weird idea of, like, of a morality play, essentially, which a lot of family movies really kind of are at their heart. But the, like, saccharine, in your face nature of the morality play is so on display in North, and very much on display in the 1994 Richie Rich film.
This is where Devin reveals that he's never seen the 1994 Richie Rich film.
Really? With John Larry? Oh my god! Okay.
I've never seen it, and
that might be another one we might have to
and
address
I'm
in the
fine
future.
with it. I am all about hitting these things for time capsule episodes so that we have stuff banked for people in case something happens. I'm all about it. And you mentioned that movie, and I was trying to think this whole time, like, what was Macaulay Culkin doing? Because Elijah Wood is, I mean, he's the epitomous good son in The Good Son, right? He's the titular character. I haven't seen that movie since I was too young to see that movie. And it's in there. I know it's buried in my head, but, like, he's the good son. And, Macaulay Culkin got killed by bees in a movie with Dan Aykroyd. Also, if we're looking for connections.
But 1994 in terms of family films is, like, it is a plethora. There are so many movies for you to choose from, to take your kids to buy on VHS for Christmas, for the kids to just watch, and, you know, for the rest of their lives. Like, there's so many movies coming out that year that you can really kind of, that kids can feast on. And again, this is just what it feels like was always happening in the early 90s. Every year felt like it was just chock full of just 1,000 films that hit. Not just 1,000 films and none of them landed, because that was kind of the problem we were starting to see towards the end of the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s, and then COVID came along, and now they don't make movies anymore, apparently. but this idea that, like, we were just getting, you know, a movie a week, and people were enjoying those movies. Now, critics might not have been, because the other thing is that all of these movies I've mentioned are pretty much unanimously across the board shit upon by, as far as, like, critics go. But they're still making bank, and that's the other big difference about the 90s, is it also felt like this need to align with art criticism in the day-to-day didn't exist. This idea that we didn't have to have a film degree in order to talk about why a movie doesn't work for us. People either just liked a movie or didn't, and they were willing to put their money where their mouth was. And so movies did gangbusters, despite the fact that they were panned. Whereas, like, if we feel like nowadays, mostly we see that line up, right? Where if a movie is getting panned by critics, it's also not going to make it in the box office, and vice versa. If a movie is being loved by critics, generally we see that and part of that is because film criticism to a lot of people has gone on the wayside, and rather than being actually critical of film, they try and just kind of go with the flow to not piss anybody off, which is definitely something you can find with certain publications for sure. But the other side of that is also just the audiences nowadays are much more aware of what is considered good cinema, and, like, take that into account when they go to it, right? And so North is one of these movies that rarely gets that not so rarely at the time kind of gets panned, and nobody like nobody seems to care. This movie to me was fucking everywhere when I was growing up. It was at the rental place. There were posters up. It was one of those ones where the posters felt like they were up for years at the cinema. Like, I remember there being VHS tapes that I would buy, more than one that I would buy, and the preview would be before the movie would be a preview for North. There was all North and Foul Play. Do you remember those movies? The really weird ones about, like, the duck dimensions?
No, I do not remember. The Foul Play that I remember features Chevy Chase and Goldie Hawn. I didn't know there was another one.
Foul Play might have been the subtitle on the actual one. So let me see if I can find these movies. But like I remember Duck People very, very specifically.
Beautiful. I mean, we know that you have a Duck People fixation, and there's nothing wrong with that. That sounded like judgment.
Magic in the Mirror. That's the one. Magic in the Mirror. Foul Play was the subtitle. Yeah.
Don't know nothing about, and that's foul FOWL, right? Like, I just want to make sure they're leaning. Oh,
actually, Magic in the Mirror 2 is the one with the subtitle Foul Play. Magic in the Mirror. So yeah, it's one of those ones where where in the first one a little girl goes through the mirror into a magical world, and then in the second one things come out of the mirror, because that's apparently the only way we can make a sequel to that.
That's, I mean, Neverending Story did it. So that was kind of the trope maker, I guess. Okay, so if we were going to structure this like a documentary on YouTube, right now we would look at the reason why everything you're talking about in 94. 94, without a doubt. We were going to do Clerks earlier this year, but, you know, things happened and we didn't get a chance to look at it. And right now in the Say Report Labs, I am cooking up a way to look at the View Askew-universe trilogy that's going to make Siegen shit his pants when I reveal it to him.
I mean, Dogma is now officially out of the claws of Harvey Weinstein,
which is insane. But I don't know if it fell into the perfect clause that I don't know. I wish that Kevin owned it, just to be completely honest about it. That's especially since he lobbied for it for so long, and the way that we see everything going in Hollywood. But no, let's stay on North and everything there. Like 94, though, huge year, right? In addition to something like Clerks hitting and showing that a guy can do it by maxing out his credit cards, Quentin Tarantino does Pulp Fiction. Now, he had done Reservoir Dogs 2 years earlier, but Pulp Fiction is the one that everybody kind of noticed. And probably because Bruce Willis was in it fresh off of appearing in Rob Reiner's North, right? I saw him as an Easter Bunny in this Rob Reiner film. Can't wait to see him as a boxer here. I kid, of course. So 94 was this sort of a landmark year for film. And the initial thing that I want to say as to why North doesn't quite fit is that the film was done in 1993, and they were going to release it in February of 1993. And on the one hand, that's a very logical reason why things would happen that way, but that's also what happened with The Mask. The Mask was a film that was completed, but then they're like, we don't know when to release this movie. And then Ace Ventura comes.
It doesn't fit into like the mold of any particular season of film, right?
Right.
And like here are the air quotes that I'm putting around that.
Yeah.
But like it doesn't fit into it doesn't fit into the romantic movies earlier in the year. It doesn't fit into the blockbuster films, and it sure as hell doesn't fit into the award-winning films. So when do we put this?
Yeah, we don't need to dump this movie, but I don't think it'll make it. But then Ace Ventura comes along as a dump season film, released in February of 1994, does gangbusters. All of the problematic stuff about Ace Ventura aside, looking at it just from the facts standpoint, in 94, that movie blows up box office expectations. And New Line Cinema, who they're going to be important later on in this episode, if I had to put good money on it, sees an opportunity to finally distribute The Mask. And, like, we're just going to release it while Jim Carrey is the biggest fucking name in the world because of the Pet Detective movie.
But this also explains why I felt like I was seeing and hearing about North for years.
Yes, that's what I was going to go to. And that's why Siegen saw posters for it for a year, because they put them up planning for it to release in February 93. And then Reiner's like, no, I think I can get more out of it. I think I can make it a better movie. And so he works and he toils and gets a July 1994 release date. But by July 1994, the entire landscape of has changed and shifted, right? And the final nail in the coffin of this shift, and we will get there more than likely next year, is Toy Story. Because up to Toy Story, movies were kind of for everybody, right? Everybody would go see a Disney film and all that. And Toy Story, I don't know if it was the marketing, I don't know if it was just what it was about it, because there's clearly stuff in there for adults too. It's one of those films that walks the line very well. But after Toy Story, that's when it looks like there's this clear delineation between films that are for like the kids that the whole family will go to, and the quote-unquote family film that something like North is, right? A little darkness in your family film, that tracks. Look at Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? You saw that in the theaters as a kid if you were born in the 80s. That's just a fact. Like, your parents took you to go see it because it was a movie that they wanted to see. And you were definitely traumatized by either Judge Doom, to bring the Doom connection in, or that fucking shoe going into the dip.
I mean, I think what it really is, with going back to the Toy Story of it all, is that Toy Story has offensive jokes in it. Like, just to be blunt. And I don't mean offensive in, like, racist or anything like that. I mean that if you are a pearl-clutching, older, adult that is bringing your 7-year-old to go see the latest Disney movie, and then you watch Mr. Potato Head take his lips off and simulate kissing his own ass, there's an offense there, right? Like, you were just like, that was not what I wanted my child to see. And like, in that reaction, it is in the wake of that reaction that you see a demand for some more cleaner films, for lack of a better word. Like if you're going to point to anything in Toy Story that really kind of might push that kind of narrative, it is because of the fact that because Toy Story is so blatantly making adult jokes as well as jokes for the kids, is so happy to be funny just for the sake of funny, because also the kids' jokes in it are also still funny jokes. It's not just like, oh, this character falls over and farts, which is like, yep, that's what people do. They pass gas. But as a kid, you find that shit hilarious, right? But that's not what they do in Toy Story. That's not the kind of humor it is. There's just like silly moments or scary moments and things like that when you're an adult and you realize, oh, I don't know if I want my kid necessarily seeing this kind of stuff. I'm going to go seek out something that is not this. And like, I don't love that attitude. I don't embrace that attitude. But like, that is what happens, right? That is why after this we start to get like this really weird, like, just glut of films. I mean, one of the easiest ways to track this is not the Land Before Time series as a whole, but specifically the Land Before Time series after about like the 4th or 5th film, right? Because like the first like 1 to 3 of those movies, super dark.
The first
right? There's
one
a
is
lot
definitely
of really dark, scary shit.
Once you get to the made for the home release sequel, I guess, I mean, I haven't seen them in forever. The second one definitely has some stuff with the fact that they're hanging out with the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like, there's some stuff that's dark about that. And the third one, they're chased by raptors. You're right. It is definitely the fourth one where, like, it loses its teeth, if you'll pardon the pun.
And then they go on to make like 10 more of those motherfuckers, like to the 15? Point where they get to the one where they're like, friendship is magic by the end of like the 11th one or whatever. Yeah. And you're just like, this is really weird.
Why are they hanging out with a modern dolphin? Like, I understand that like things back then evolved into dolphins, but this is a modern dolphin they're hanging out with. This is Echo the Dolphin, Tides of Time hanging out with the Land Before Time.
So back to North. I don't think that North suffers because of its darkness. I don't think North suffers because of the weird racist stuff in it, unfortunately. Like, I don't think those are the reasons people don't click with this movie. I think it's just the pure absurdity of it. There's just so much in this movie that are not quite like satirical Naked Gun style gags, but almost feel like they were supposed to be. Yeah, right. Like it's this weird, like, almost uncommitment to the bit that this movie refuses to ever really truly lean into the full weirdness, which is why it never feels like earnest. And so at the end of the day, it just kind of becomes not fun to watch at every moment. There's definitely fun moments. I no joke, I do think Bruce Willis is doing some great work in this movie. He plays this really weird, like, guardian angel, because that's what he's straight up called at one point, character in this movie that pops in and out of Elijah Wood's life, right? North's life. And, like, I think every time he shows up on screen, the movie's better for it.
Oh, yeah. He's, like, the only one who really commits to what this film is going to be. There's no stakes in this film, which is fucking crazy, because every 15 minutes, the movie is like, look at how fucking big the stakes are. And it's like, but they aren't that big. Right? Like you keep insisting upon yourself that this is like the biggest stakes in the world if North doesn't pick parents at the end of this. But honestly, I've seen no evidence of that. Like I'll
go one further. We're told that if he doesn't succeed, so the story of North is that he doesn't like his own mom and dad, so he goes to try and find better ones. Blanket, like super surface level, that's what the story of North is for anybody that does not watch this movie. And I cannot blame you if after we talk about it you decide to not watch this movie. I also couldn't blame you if after we talk about it all you want to do is watch this movie. But the idea is that he is not happy with his own parents. He goes in search of other parents, and he encounters a whole bunch of other mother and father characters, literally all named Ma and Pa or Mother Father or something to that effect, right? And it's all about him kind of going into dipping into all these different lives, mostly culturally based, which is where it starts to get sticky, right? Not just sticky, start like outright offensive, as we've already mentioned in certain places.
I watched the episode of Scorpion today where Mary Mouser has to get dunked into an oil drum full of honey because she is immune compromised. She was not as sticky as the situations that North finds himself in this film.
And so there's just so he does this, right? And Bruce Willis pops in and out as this like narrator / guardian angel kind of guiding him through this whole process. And the only true stakes that were ever truly given for North is that if he doesn't succeed in finding better parents, and again, I'm putting air quotes around that, if he doesn't succeed in basically figuring his shit out, he's going to be put into an orphanage. But everything that we are led to believe about the world that North actually lives in, the actual globe that North lives upon, is that it is so goofy and silly and over the top and weird and wild and wacky that I have a hard time imagining that the orphanage he ends up in is going to truly ever be that bad. It might be cartoonishly evil. It might be like Annie levels of weird, but even Annie goes darker than this in terms of the realities of being in an orphanage. Annie succeeds in being a much better example of that than I think this movie ever truly gives me the impression it could be, right? So I never feel like he's in any real trouble, because even if he doesn't succeed, part of me wonders, like, I wonder if there's a version of this movie where he didn't find parents and does go to the orphanage and is still, like, gets there and realizes how happy he is. Right. Because at that point, he at least doesn't have anybody telling him what to do or how to be.
So this film ends. We're jumping to the end. Spoilers for North at this point, though we've already kind of been spoiling it. Honestly, yeah. But just, I am going to talk about the end of the film right now.
No.
So if what we've done in these 30 minutes... has given you any interest, go watch North, right? Whatever. It's very affordable to rent on Amazon Prime. And then it's free on Tubi, which is the future of television, but I'm sure we've already talked about that.
There's also a pretty damn good version of it that's just up on YouTube. Nice. That if you don't pay for YouTube Premium, there's commercials, but if you
have a good enough ad blocker and you like install it right before you use YouTube, before YouTube is the wiser, then you can watch it. Then it'll block the ads until YouTube's like, hey, wait a second. That person in Sector 7G is not getting any ads. And then they'll flood you with them. But so the end of this film has North getting to his parents. Well, it reveals that the whole thing has been a dream. This is where I say that North is basically a 90s retelling of It's a Wonderful Life, straight down to the fact that Frank Capra's fucking grandson is the first assistant director on this film. Frank Capra III, working on this movie. We've seen him in things like Mixed Nuts, so it's not completely crazy, but, just to talk about it. This film is basically It's a Wonderful Life, but instead of it being, you're going to show you what the world is like without you in it, we're going to show you what your world would be like without your parents in it. Like, a wish is made, the wish is granted, Clarence is here, Bruce Willis in a bunny suit, and at the end, he wakes up and it was all a dream. But was it a dream?
Even before that, the lesson, what's wild about that is that the lesson is learned before we need to get to the whole... Like, he recognizes, oh shit, I actually didn't have it that bad with my actual parents, wants to get back to them, succeeds in getting to them, and then is, no joke, shot.
Yep.
Like, that is what happens.
That is how
and
it
then,
ends.
as Devin states, he wakes up and realizes it was all a dream.
it was all a dream, but you were there, and you, and I mean, like, he gets a ride home from a stranger. North could be a much darker movie. The guy who plays the Easter Bunny on the 3rd floor in the toy section, you don't let him drive you home. You call your parents. Even if your parents are an overworked travel agent and pants inspector.
I will go like to live in the verisimilitude of this movie, right? To live in the truth of this film. Like Bruce Willis as this character, as this guiding character in this film, has shown up everywhere. Not just as the man in the bunny suit. You know what I mean? He's not just getting into a car with a man in a bunny suit from earlier in the movie.
Yeah, but he is.
This is a guy that
it was in his subconscious region. That didn't happen. All of those moments. I mean, I was half expecting it to be revealed that Bruce Willis was a ghost the whole fucking time. I think this is where M. Night Shyamalan got the idea. Was he saw North?
Yeah, so I guess that's the kind of question you need to ask yourself about the bookends of this movie. Then, right? Is like him going to the mall, which is his quote unquote happy place.
Not just the mall, that big armchair.
Well, very specifically, the living room display in essentially the Sears, the department store of the mall, right? Yeah. And he likes to sit in the armchair,
store,
right?
If you will.
And then he supposedly, what we learn at the end of this movie when he wakes up is that he fell asleep there and then he dreamed this whole thing. My problem with that is that there's plenty of weird absurdity that happens before he falls asleep. It's not like the world gets weird once we enter North's, what we now know to be subconscious. The world is already pretty fucking buck wild up to that moment.
Yeah, like when he's Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof in a 6th grade production of Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
Like that's something, and it's he is also I really like, part of the message I like about this movie is that he feels that he's special. Right? He's accelerated. Right. He's an Aegis
That's
student,
the other kind of large driving force of all of this, right? It's not just that he doesn't like his parents and that he feels his parents don't love him, but it's also because, as far as we're supposed to believe, everybody else does. The whole world supposedly loves this kid. He is a phenomenal actor, a phenomenal athlete, a phenomenal mathlete. Like he is an all-around just best kid you could hope for, and his parents don't seem to recognize that. And he takes that very personally and decides to go find new parents. But it is the most, like, spoiled concept ever for this kid, and we're never given a moment to believe he is a good kid, just good at things. Right.
Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, and also, is he that good at things? Like, his class average, he has a 91 for his, like, grade average, and it's like that 91's like an A-. Like, I'm not trying to shit on North.
I will point out that, I will point out we don't know what if every other kid is a C-, then yes.
If he's the only A- student in a sea of C's, then yes, well, first of all those C kids fucking hate him for breaking the curve. As a former curve breaker myself, I feel for you, North.
Those kids hate him already anyway.
Do they? They also kind of love him. Like they also
a montage of moments though. There's no way there is no way.
But we never see it. We literally never see that until the end. We're like, North is gonna fuck up our paradise. Let's fucking kill him with rocks.
Well, we do see it. We see it very specifically in the major villain of this movie.
Winchell.
Winchell, his supposed best friend who tries to literally get him assassinated.
I don't know if Winchell is real. We never see Winchell pre-dream.
That's true. We are given a montage in which North is being compared to every other fucking kid in town.
Every other kid is being compared to North. That's different.
Right,
but North always looks
to jaywalk and they try and stop him. A kid doesn't floss and they give him shit. A kid
North
steals a cookie and they tell him don't do that. So there is no fucking way that there is not a kid in that town that there's got to be at least one that's just like, man, fuck this kid.
Fuck North. Why does everybody love North so goddamn much? I just try to be a normal kid. I just want an extra cookie before breakfast. You bring up a very good point there, because it's something I was thinking of. I'm like, man, it's weird. You'd think all these fucking kids would hate North, but I'm not getting that. Right? Even to the fact
they really, really wanted to lean into the idea that there is a portion of this movie that takes place in his head, so it's not the real world, which is why all this absurd shit can happen, right? There is not, and this I will lay at the feet of Rob Reiner as the creator of this film, there is no good indication of that. Even in the end, when you are shown that he wakes up in the mall and it's like, oh, it was all a dream, I I never thought back to a moment where I thought, oh, well, that's where the world changed, right? Because as I said, the world's already pretty silly and absurd. I will point to, in this same year, something like Pagemaster, using a pretty blunt, like, mechanic in showing you when the world becomes fantastic, in that literally it enters an animated state, right?
Speaking of Roger Rabbit, yeah. No, you're right. And Christopher Lloyd, too. It all
this
works.
Movie doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't do anything to indicate to you we are no longer in that world. There is no mirror stepping through the mirror moment for North. We see him stepping out of the mirror in the end when he gets shot, I suppose. But it didn't make me sit back and go, oh, that's because in the beginning of this movie when he did this, things changed. That never even occurred to me. I honestly couldn't tell you at what point in my memory he falls asleep in the storyline. You say he didn't meet Winchell before he fell asleep. I have to believe you on that.
It's not that we didn't meet it. We don't meet him. Like, Winchell is not shown prior to him falling asleep.
Right. And I just have to take your word for that. I don't actually. You could tell me that scene was before or after. It fits in either concept for me.
Well, because what it is the, like, free agent ripple effect into Winchell and him telling him the idea. And that's the first time that we meet the villain of this film. And it's, and he is the villain of the film. The kid's freaking crazy. I mean, good for Matt McCurley. He was a freaking newbie in Little Giants the same year, right? And I guess this is where Jussie Smollett was, and that's why he couldn't be in the sequel to The Mighty Ducks. He was too busy being in North. That's weird. It's weird that Jussie Smollett was in it again. Like, this film, in so many ways, felt like it was an amalgamation of everything you and I care about in movies. And, like, then I have to wonder, like, this is a film I saw in 1994. I talked to my mother about it, and she's like, I remember he done like his parents. I thought it was cute that Jason Alexander and Elaine were his parents and that they were married. But mostly, as a parent of a boy who was about North's age, all I could think is every adult in this movie is annoying. I would want to leave them, too.
Well, okay, so then we get to the other problem, right? Of this is something that does get levied against movies because we already mentioned it, like Matilda, right? Like and other things like that, where I don't know who this movie is for, because as a kid, there's some stuff that gets done and said in this movie that I don't think I would have. I don't think I did pick up on when I saw it way back in the day, and I definitely I don't think my little self would have gotten this joke, this reference. So that's fine. Having jokes and references for older people is fine. But, like, as an adult, I'm not enjoying this movie because every parent in this movie sucks, right? And again, this is something that gets levied against some of these other films out there, like Matilda, or in the same year, like Little Giants. Like, the way that, like, Ed O'Neill and Rick Moranis behave in that movie is pretty, like, offensive in certain moments. The kind of conversations that they have about, like, can boys and girls play football together and stuff like that, and the ways in which that's handled as it gets really weird. And then, like, so, like, having these kids movies where the adults suck is pretty normal at this time, but what that does is it makes it hard for like parents to get on board with like getting behind some of these films because of this shit, right? Like sometimes I remember I talk about a movie with my parents where I'm just like, oh yeah, we watch that all the time, and my dad will just be like, oh, I hate that movie, and I'm like at the time I'm like, I don't know why you hate this movie so much. I love this movie. I'm gonna watch it 1,000 times this year. Rewatching it when I'm older, I'm like, oh, I get why my dad was annoyed. First of all, I was making him watch it 1,000 times. Secondly, there is nothing in this movie to make him feel good about being a dad.
Yeah.
There's nothing in this movie. There is one moment in this family in this movie where he ends up with a family that is supposed to be kind of idealistic, played by John Ritter and
Faith Ford,
plays the wife in that movie.
Faith Ford.
Yeah, Faith Ford, right? And the two of them are like good parents, but even then, like the bit of that moment is that even with good parents, what North considers to be good parents, and honestly, they appear to be. I say that, but like the movie implies something sinister, but no, they appear to be good parents. Something still is not working for him in that moment, and that is fucking like that is super deep in terms of like the idea of like nature nurture, like mental health development and stuff like that. But he feels like I still don't work here. And there's like, and so even when he is with a good parent, North is still upset. So it's just like, how could any parent watch this movie and not feel like they have been like you know,
demonized.
Kind of in some ways interrogated, right?
It's, I mean, and this is where it's certainly not, but for me, this is one of those movies where adults versus kids, which was a narrative that was shoved on us a lot growing up.
A lot.
And also, why do you think that, like, okay, boomer and all of that? It's literally what was written into our DNA, was to question and kind of fight against our parents' generation. Like, that's all Nickelodeon
species, right?
did.
Like,
right, yeah.
Like, right.
But it's also...
It is a necessary... like, question authority, kids. Like, this is not me being like, they should make more movies where their parents are right. No. But you also can't... You also can't like instill like that every parent is out there to destroy your creative essence, which is kind of what the whole point of this movie is.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. Like I go back and I watch old Nickelodeon stuff, and it's so the kids versus the adults, and like not in ways that are like outwardly evil. Like The Adventures of Pete and Pete, right? To focus in on one. There are the adults that are against like kids having fun, right? Like there is a cabal that exists to make sure that kids are not allowed to do creative things.
The entire Christmas episode of Pete and Pete is all about the evil trash man, right?
Right. Well, yeah, that he won't pick up the garbage. Yeah, the snowplow man, because then it was supposed to sort of lead into Snow Day as well. Because Snow Day was originally a Pete and Pete movie, and then they rewrote it once Pete and Pete was over. There's a lot of stuff. Pete and Pete probably deserves a full episode. But I will talk about, like, which is why characters like their parents and Artie, as adults who, like, are willing to meet them on their level and understand that, like, just because you're a kid doesn't mean you're an idiot, those are, like, some of the best relationships in the show. Right? Steve Buscemi being Ellen's father and her continuing to ask why. Like, why do I need to learn this math? And all of the substitute teachers, like, not having an answer. But then when the substitute teacher is her father and she's like, why? And he's like, well, for these reasons. Like, it's again, like, it's one of those where you're like, oh my God, it's going to be a showdown between Ellen and her dad. But no, Steve Buscemi plays that role and he's just like, well, no, this is why you need to understand, like, algebra, right? Because you're going to use it. It doesn't look like you're going to use it, and you're never going to use it as formulaic as you have to in the classroom. But being able to identify a variable and what will happen if that variable changes, that's something you're going to need to know how to do later on in life.
I mean, but this is what made Nickelodeon in general kind of stick out like a sore thumb. And weirdly, like, I don't know why so many parents were so offended by Nickelodeon over Disney when I feel like Nickelodeon was the one doing that kind of shit.
Trying to do stuff like that. But I mean, Pete and Pete is really the only one that I would point to where...
No, Clarissa explains it all. Her mom and dad are really great. Like they encourage her. Her dad's a little dumb, but he encourages what she's doing, right? Like there's a lot of parents at that time on Nickelodeon television.
I mean, those are two that stick out. And I really like, what I like about like something like Clarissa is that her brother, who is technically another kid peer, is the villain so often. Yeah. Because it's like, no, but you also got to like watch your fucking tribe for people who are trying to steal and treat you like garbage. Like, it's not just the older generation.
The general narrative felt like parents fall into one of three categories: absent, stupid, or evil. If they're not absent, they're dumb, and if they're not dumb, they're mean. And it's just like that seemed to be the only kind of parents we were introduced to in the media. And when we found those parents that weren't, it was always in those kinds of places where we were being told, this is too complex for you, you shouldn't be watching this. And it's like, well, wait a minute, man. Like, that sucks, right? But North does not want to be that complex. You should love your mom and dad. You feel good with your mom and dad. You're at home with your mom and dad, so just be home with your mom and dad is basically the whole fucking movie.
Well, I mean, like, the really crazy thing is that we're told that, like, it's been going on for a while and North is off. We're only see one example of his parents. And like, I remember those dinners where like my father came home and he was upset at his job, so he vented at the dinner table. Like, you talk about his privilege showing, and honestly, I don't think he ever learns like the privilege lesson that you're talking about, which would make this movie weaker, because the whole time he is just fucking, the world is roses for him. Like, he doesn't
learn about his privilege in terms of his place in the world, in terms of like economics or anything like that. What he learns about, though, is the privilege he had of good parents, right? And this is something that I will openly admit that is something that I have had to come to terms with in my own life. Is like, you grow up thinking your mom and dad are mean. You grow up thinking your mom and dad are trying to wreck you, right? And then when you become an adult, if you had good parents, you come to recognize that the boundaries that they were setting and the ways in which they stepped in were actually them loving you, right? Like, that was them showing you how they cared for you. And that is what he learns by the end of this movie, is that all of this stuff that he levies against his parents, like, oh, you're never around, but like, they're out there because they're trying to make money in order to take care of you, to support the 6 fucking after school clubs you're involved in.
Also, are they never around? They're there to have dinner. They're there to have a cooked dinner. It's not like they're eating out of KFC buckets.
Yeah,
like,
that's the other side of it, right? But he doesn't see it that way. Right. And that's what I mean by he has to kind of come to terms with his own privilege. He has been lucky enough that his parents have made his life comfortable enough that the slightest indiscretion by his parents feels like it's the end of the world. And so he must go find new moms and dads. But then, like, he comes to realize, oh, I didn't actually give them their due. And so he comes to terms with that, which is a great story. But like, there's this really weird other side to it that you're pointing out, that's not the only ways in which he's privileged. I mean, let's talk about finances. Again, this movie is all taking place in a dream, but like, this idea that he has in his head this ability to go around and do this stuff. And again, I will point out, pre-dream, he is involved in all of these like clubs and activities. Oh, yeah. And I know that shit costs money. So, like, this idea being that he never really confronts the idea of, like, financial privilege. He never, he never really confronts the idea that as a white kid, he's going to some of these homes of people of otherness that are open, like, welcoming him with open arms. But he never takes a moment to kind of look at himself in that moment and self-reflect on, like, oh, like, this is just not the way that my family does it because of the way they were raised. And, like, there's an implication that he's being raised Jewish, at least by the Jason Alexander side of his family. And, like, that in and of itself could be an exploration of, like, of something. Like, not every kid in the neighborhood celebrates Hanukkah. Like, that's just the fact, right?
Yeah, that whole talk call where he's like, he has blue eyes, he's a soprano. He ain't gonna be a soprano forever, honey. Once those testes drop, his voice is gonna change. Also, that seems like something that comes from the book. I mean, because the other thing is, you're like, where did Rob Reiner get this idea from? He got the idea from a book written by Alan Zwiebel called North. Oh, God, it's such a ridiculous title.
North, the tale of a 9-year-old boy who becomes a free agent and travels the world in search of the perfect parents.
Thank you for that, because it's ridiculous. I want to read the book after doing this, because the whole Matilda of it all, I honestly feel like that guy was trying to chase that dragon when he wrote the North book on some level. It also feels a little Walter Mitty. Admittedly, I've never read Walter Mitty, but like, just the cover and the poster for North reminds me of how the Ben Stiller Walter Mitty was sold. So, like,
Walter Mitty's a wild one, because Walter Mitty is actually a book from like the 40s, isn't it?
Right? Like, yeah, well, I mean, freaking L. Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz in 1908 or something like that. Like, before that became, it was like other silent films and like, I don't know. I'm weirded out by Wicked.
Yeah, but this book is written by Alan Zwiebel, who is I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but
you're saying it right, Zwiebel. Yeah.
But he's a writer for SNL, right? That does a ton of other comedy stuff that he's had his hands in. He's worked with Billy Crystal. He's worked with Seinfeld and what's his name there? Larry David. Larry David, right? Like, he's worked with Larry David. Like, he's a very well-known, like, comedy writer, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how many other kids' books he's written, but this was definitely like a book that he wrote in like the 80s, like just to be kind of he was already kind of a weird guy to write this stuff. And you're right, that is where a lot of like Reiner is getting like the concepts from. But from what I understand, like, there's also just a bunch of Rob Reiner-ish about.
Oh, there's definitely Rob Reiner in this. My favorite part about it is like, oh, this is based on a book. I didn't know that. That is the thing I learned about North today when I was getting ready to record this episode is, oh, it's based on a book. Oh, well, fucking course Rob Reiner wants to direct it, because that's where he shines, is adaptations. I can't think of anything he's done that isn't an adaptation from something else. I honestly can't. Yeah. If you could think of, like, because all the ones that, like, jump to mind are, like, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, Misery, A Few Good Men. No, they're all adaptations of existing work. So it's just, like, that's what he does. And I'm like, oh, okay. So when he doesn't get Shawshank Redemption, he looks for another book that he can adapt. And this screenplay, I guess, falls into his lap, and despite literally everyone else in Hollywood looking at this screenplay and saying, this screenplay is no good, Rob Reiner's like, I want to make this. It's a cute little fable. And he himself refers to it as a fable, which is why what I was trying to get to, I'm going to say like 30 minutes ago, and we went off on tangents. That's what the Say Report does, though. I'm not apologizing for that. And I'm like, it's just what happened. The original ending for this movie, after, like, North gets home, he's driven home by Bruce Willis, Jason Alexander and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, because they're only ever called North's mom and North's dad. They don't have
again. That's how all
names.
Parents. That's how all parents are referred to in this movie.
Right.
They're Ma-Tex, Pa-Tex. Their mother. They're like Hawaiian mother, Hawaiian father. I believe that's actually Eskimo mom and Eskimo
it's Alaskan.
Dad.
It's Alaskan mother and father.
Is it Alaskan? Okay, at least they go.
And in Hawaii, it's Governor Ho and Mrs. Ho, which is a whole other fucking, like, what the hell is that? Jeez. I mean, we're going to talk about all that. But they are like, oh my God, North, we didn't know where you were. We were worried sick. We called all the hospitals. Nobody knew where you were. And he's like, I just fell asleep at the mall. I'm sorry. And they're like, all right, well, why don't you go upstairs, get into your PJs, and we'll bring you up some bed. Door closes, roll credits. What initially happened, right, is after that moment where, like, North's parents are happy to see North, they bring him up that sandwich, and then in his room, as he's, like, sitting there eating the sandwich, they fall back into how they were acting, where he almost had the coronary event at the beginning of the film. And Rob Reiner was like, the darkness...
That is the version of the movie I watched today. Is that not how this movie ends normally?
Whoa. You watched a version of the movie that ended with his parents in his room fighting. Well, not fighting, but,
and
like,
then
yelling.
he just kind of, and then weirdly, so I was going to point this out, because he then weirdly, he finds comfort in it. Like, he like, smiles to himself as they do, and then credits roll.
Okay, so, I don't know. Spoilers. This is from IMDb. The movie originally ended with North and his parents in his room, and he confesses his dream to them. His dad was surprised to hear his dream, while his mom reminds him that although his parents get overwhelmed, they still love him. North's dad promises to pay closer attention to him, but in the last scene, his mom and dad ignore him again and argue. Reiner preferred this ending, but decided to end it with North reuniting with his parents after coming home because it felt it would seem pointless to audiences that North's parents would neglect him again after everything he went through. So the ending was shortened to North and his parents going inside the house and his parents agreeing to bring him dinner in bed and tuck him in.
All right, I am going to do a real Zach Morris here for a second and say fine. We are going to time out, and Devin, you are going to pause recording.
Holy fucking shit! Hi, we're back from Siege and Say, Devin, you need to pause the recording. And then he sent me the version that he already talked about is up there on YouTube. That's pretty good. And that version on YouTube has that scene that Rob Reiner was like, no. People won't understand it. Like, oh my God, that is not what I watched in theaters. And that is not what I watched on Amazon Prime Rental today.
Okay, so as I said, I kind of have memories of this when I was a kid watching it, and I couldn't tell you the ending. I honestly couldn't. I watched this today, and I just assumed that this is what I saw when I was a kid. This is not one of those movies that really stuck with me, other than the fact that I knew I didn't really like it. Like, it wasn't, there was no moments in this movie that I remember wanting to see again, so we just didn't ever watch it again. And, like, so when I watched that version today, I was just like, man, I forgot that this is, like, the end of this movie is him just basically just accepting, parents don't really listen to me, but this is what I like in life. And you're just like, what?
Sejin, that conservatively 2 minutes of extra movie. First of all, I no longer question if wind chill is real because a real world person mentions wind chill. Second of all, they fucking tell you straight up that in his dream he got shot and killed and that's what woke him up. Thank fucking Christ Costanzo wasn't Freddy Krueger, because if he kills you in a dream, you die in real life. And then there's also the thing about Winchell's sorry about putting that picture of you in your underwear in the school paper, which A, supports Siege's theory, everybody fucking hates North, but B, totally explains the whole plot line in Hawaii. That feels like it comes from fucking nowhere. Because, like, why does he care if he's going to become the Coppertone girl of Hawaii? I mean, I get it. He's an 11-year-old. He has modesty issues, blah, 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 blah. But, like, my crack? They showing my crack? Like, there was a scene where, like, that was a thing where supposedly his best friend did something similar to him to move papers.
Right.
Like, Sejin, thank you for sharing that. Hopefully we remember to do this.
I don't think it saves the movie in any way.
Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't save the movie at all.
Everything.
No, it is just,
no.
I cannot believe that, like, that's the version that's uploaded. After reading Rob Reiner be like, no, this doesn't work for me. Director, excuse me. Ooh,
I want to know where that version came from. And again, good quality, credits roll. It's not like it's like some weird version where like somebody like chopped in like a grainy edit of the scene or anything like that.
Seamless. Like, it is seamless. Yeah. And it also feels hyper Rob Reiner. Like, it's not like someone created that, because the wallpaper behind him is a basic recreation of the opening of The Princess Bride. But based on the colors and everything. Like, I understand that baseball gonna baseball, but the colors, like, it evoked memories of The Princess Bride opening for me.
I guess there is, you're talking about his room and it's making me think of this. I guess there is this weird implication in the opening credits of the movie where we kind of see all of this stuff that hints at kind of the worlds he's going to go visit later. But again, it didn't hit me as, oh, this is all laying the seed for a dream sequence. It just kind of hit me as like, this is fun movie foreshadowing. This is just fun kids movie foreshadowing for, like, he's going to imagine that he goes to the Wild West, so of course there's cowboy stuff around. Or he's going to imagine he's going to go to Hawaii, so there's a snow globe with like the Hawaiian beach in it or something. Like, or is that maybe Alaska? But like, there is that moment at the beginning of this movie, and like, and it's bookended by the version that I saw, him coming back to that room and like, and this happening and this kind of being the world he's back to. In a weird way, the whole idea about the dream sequence works better for me in this version. If you didn't bookend it with him kind of coming back to this space and this happening, it almost feels like you kind of lose that whole idea of the bookend of the dream sequence as well.
Yeah, that is super weird. Because, like, Bedford is what I noticed, right? The train station for Bedford is what I hooked into at the beginning of this movie. Because, like, I'd seen the movie, so I knew it. And I'm like, oh, so, like, Bedford Falls. And then it kind of cuts to what looks like the street facade from Wonderful Life. Knowing full well that this is about a dream, like a wish that ends up being a dream. And getting to see, you know, like, be careful what you wish for. Your life might not be that bad as you think it is. Just because you don't have some other version of success. Like, that's the other thing. Like, I don't know what version of success North is chasing. Like, I wish on some level we got to see, like, that other kids hate him. So, like, he's kind of isolated from his peer group, right? Other 11-year-olds hate him. Other adults love him, but the only adults that he really wants any attention from are his parents. And this whole fucking movie is basically him throwing a big tantrum to try to get his parents' attention.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. Like, and that's the other thing. Like, I talk about, like, rewarding negative behavior. The film is very good at showing, like, this was a dream, and he did not like that. But also, like, for so much of the movie, his parents don't give in to him throwing a tantrum to get their attention. They're, like, granted, in film, they go comatose for like 80 days, right?
Right.
Ben Stein showing up to be like, it's the first simultaneous coma longer than 70 days. North's folks. And you're like, the fuck is happening in this movie, right? Winchell having like a high rise in New York makes no fucking sense. I don't know where North lives, so him settling, like, that's weird as well. Shut the fuck up, Scarlett Johansson, in the scene with the Nelsons. Like, she has the most annoying lines, and it's just like, oh my God, I feel so bad for you, Scarlett Johansson. I know that you've gone on record as saying it was a magical experience, but like, you're supposed to be in the family that's perfect, and then they give you all these weird lines because on some level it feels like North's problem with the Nelsons, right? And this is subtext that I'm picking up from those scenes, is the fact
they already have their own kids.
Not just that, it's that he would be fighting for affection from these great parents.
Right. No, that's it.
Yeah.
It's like it's the most selfish thing. Is like the only thing that makes that world not perfect is that he's not an only child in it.
Right.
Like, it sucks.
And but they never like, that's like, we want to make sure that you understand that. We're not going to blatantly say it. And that makes it weird. It makes it weird that they don't blatantly say it, because like there's a moment like, all right, it's time for bed. And then like, oh shit, they're saying the parents are saying goodnight to other people but me? What the fuck is happening? I'm not going to floss tonight. That'll show them. Like, that doesn't happen.
No, I mean, again, it's another example of this movie just not committing to
any
a
of the
concept.
lessons.
It just doesn't want to, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So now we're gonna go on a little bit of a world tour with the fact, and like, these are not for kids. Like, straight up, these references are not for the children. And we'll get to why these references are not for the children at the end of this little thing. We're not going to go international. The most important families...
Oh, yeah. That was the moment that I was thinking of earlier when I was saying I don't know who this was for. The Jerry Lewis in France jokes.
Oh, my God.
The Jerry Lewis in France jokes were so beyond the pale that my thought was, even if I was an adult at the time, if I wasn't truly kind of keyed into like film culture, what would this 2 minutes of cinema be to me? Like watching Jerry Lewis in France.
All right, well, I guess let's go international first, because France is the last one before he comes back to America. He goes to Zaire, and he can't live in Zaire because women don't wear tops. So his new mother shows up, you know, with her breasts exposed. We never see them because the film is rated PG, but Elijah Wood's eyes are as big as you've ever seen his eyes. And he's like, I can't live here or I'll get no homework done because I'm an 11-year-old boy. Thanks. And prior to that, he goes to China, where it feels like it's the past China, not modern 1993 China. Where they're like,
China has to be a place of historical dynasties in which we are.
Long live the North dynasty. Give him the emperor cut, which is just the little ponytail. And he's like, nope, thank you, bye-bye, North out. And it's like, okay, like those three scenes are nuts, right? Those three international scenes are insane. But now we're going to focus on the national stuff, the domestic scenes. And we start with him going to Texas, because here's the other thing, right? Like, the central crux is not that he's divorcing his parents. It's that he's essentially putting himself up on the waiver wire as a free agent, and parents are fucking bidding to have them as their child. So, like, all of the travel that he does in this movie, all of those expenses are covered by these potential parents. And that's insane, right? Like, he's an emancipated minor who's allowed to fly around the world on the dimes of these adults. This ends poorly in the real world, right? This does not end happy for North. It's his dream, but in the real world, no, you ain't leaving our ranch, son. And then it's Dan Aykroyd, so he says a bunch of words fast that make it sound more impressive than what it actually is. But so he winds up in Texas, And that's where the stereotypes really start. Dan Aykroyd and Reba McEntire play the Texas parents. And
who, of course, get a country music video in the middle of all of this.
Yes. All done to the theme of Bonanza.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. And they have a fucking tragic story as well. Like, they have to ping pong from, like, the saddest fucking shit to, like, let's have a musical number, right? Maybe the people in the audience are feeling something. We don't want that. This is a fun little fable. Because they want North because he's the best, right? Which we obviously, he has a 91 grade point average. He's not the best. That really kind of twisted in me. But North believes he's the best, and it's North's best, and it's North's subconscious. So that's the world we have to exist in. And they also want everything to be the biggest and the best. So their plan is to fatten up North to be a huge, big, fat guy who's also still the best. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because they had a son of their own, Buck, who could eat more in a day than most people could eat in a month, which is why February was always his least favorite month. What the fuck is that joke?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is that joke?
Because it's not the biggest month, I guess. Because
I guess the smallest month. Oh, it's because like people only eat 28 days in that month, so he's eating less in February based on the weird logic. But Buck tragically passed away in a stampede accident. And it's like,
which we learned in the song, right? Like,
no,
that
it was
is
right before the song. We learned the tragic backstory before the song starts.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's the lead-in to the song, which is fucking.
Is that like
Buck Wild?
He was tragically killed in that stampede. We're gonna make you big and fat, gonna play football, and you're already betrothed to this little girl. Come on, North, eat some ribs, eat some mashed potatoes. Like, it's like, what the fuck is happening? And it's I get it. You got Reba McEntire in your movie. You should have her sing. But, like, Dan Aykroyd. And then the other crazy thing is that was the role that was, like, up in the air the most of all of the parents in this film. Like, Dan Aykroyd was, like, the fifth choice after John Candy and then Robin Williams. But he couldn't get out of Mrs. Doubtfire. I don't remember what John Candy couldn't get out of. He couldn't get away from it. So, like, I guess Dan Aykroyd will step up and sing with Reba McEntire. It's just...
Dan Aykroyd's not afraid to be in a weird, absurdist comedy that's going to tank.
I mean, I guess that is sort of his evolution.
Oh, you know, he's got nothing left to lose.
Oh, my God. And there's nothing but trouble when you got nothing left to lose.
But there... Yeah. So
sorry. So
there's the Texas parents, right?
Right. And then, but so the way that North like justifies why he's not happy with the Texas parents is not just the fact that like they're gonna fatten me up, right? Like I'm gonna lose my central Northness, which is my lithe hobbit-like figure. It's the fact that he'll be living in the shadow of their original child. So everything that he does will be compared to what Buck did. And also, to hear tell, that'll be one hell of a shadow. Because we gotta jab the dead kid about his fucking weight. Like, we created this character. He's dead. He can't defend himself. And it's also where we meet Bruce Willis again for the first time as Gabby, the ranch hand, who shoots a silver dollar clean through. And then when you see it close up, it's like, that's clearly made of plastic. That is the most plastic prop I have ever seen.
Also, the hole in it is just so clearly not like a shot through hole.
Yeah, it's
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's this awful thing. So he ends up leaving, and the Texans, to their credit, understand where he's coming from, and they're sorry that they put that pressure on him. And then, as an act of good faith and to avoid a sequel to Little Big League, North returns the Houston Astros to Pa, Texas, because he had signed the team over to them early on in their negotiations as an act of good faith. Houston Texans, you know, the cheating team, which we could talk about that because we're initially from New England, the cheating region.
The cheating region of all sports. Oh, man. Yeah.
So he leaves Texas, and then the next family is in Hawaii. And again, it's not like modern day Hawaii. He's on freaking pontoon boats that are being rowed by basically slaves wearing nothing but palm fronds. And he is brought to the palatial island estate of the governor of Hawaii and his wife, Governor Ho and Mrs. Ho. And that is the one that, like, kind of leans into the absurd enough for me, with, like, let's actually have a negotiation about what it will mean if you come to live here as our son, right? Like, sure. When they wrote the Hawaii section, they're like, all right, we introduced John Lovett. This is the first time that we've said John Lovett's name in an hour and 19 minutes, just for the fucking record.
Who is the second big bad in this movie? Second to a 10-year-old child.
I mean, you say second big bad. He's also, like, he's being manipulated just as badly. Arthur Belt.
Right. No, he is the most henching of henchmen. This idea being that he is bumbling and really, pathetic enough that you can't really see him as the true bad guy.
His introduction is like, he'll find you, and then ambulance comes flying by, and he comes up in the fucking Pacer, and then backs up, and he's like, you're North! And he's like, you were chasing an ambulance. Am I keeping you from something? Like, not a joke for kids, right? That's a joke for adults. And it's like, so John Lovett's, like, his whole thing is like, we're going to make this a real negotiation. You're going to be this free agent. And in Hawaii, that is where the whole, like, they actually, like, have, like, we'll go inside and we'll pound out some details. So then after they've, like, pounded out the details, North is like, so what's the catch, though? I don't mean to be rude, but, like, am I fulfilling the whole of a dead kid or something? And they're like, no, you would be our first child. There is only one place in all of Hawaii that is desolate. Unfortunately, that place is Lady Ho. And it's just like, what the fuck? What a way to refer to an infertile woman as, like, the only spot in Hawaii that is desolate, where nothing can grow. It's like, there's a fucking moment there where you're like, holy fuck. But then it's revealed that North is not being adopted strictly to be their first child, but to be the white face of Hawaii in order to make more people want to settle there and not just visit.
I mean, this is where, the movie, the reason that it feels so gross and racially insensitive in the domestic stuff and the foreign stuff and all around is because
we haven't even gotten to
it's
Alaska
not that
yet.
It's not. What? What?
Oh, I said, and just wait till Alaska, man, because
right, yeah, but like before we even get there, right?
Yeah,
there is this idea that it's trying to, like, say something about these places, but, like, it is so clearly not reflective of the like the idea that Hawaii is trying to find its identity in a world in which it has been brought into America rather recently in the grand scheme of
35
things,
years ago. That because
while,
he even says
while also
right,
while also still trying to, like, maintain its own sense of self, right? That is a legitimate struggle that we know that the people of Hawaii have, that the state of Hawaii has, whatever, like, the indigenous, like, state of whatever, I don't know what they refer to them as, to be entirely honest, but, like, this idea that Hawaii is trying to figure out who they are and how they fit into the grand scheme of things, especially now that they are now part of the United States, totally a legitimate conversation for people to be having, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that being touched upon in these moments is interesting. The problem is that it doesn't feel like anybody that's trying to have that conversation in this movie truly earnestly is having it, right? And that's when it swings back into offensive, right? And so, like, the Texas stuff is kind of there because it is being stereotypical and all of that, right? The Hawaii stuff gets weird in that regard and gets weirder than the Texas stuff, and then that's when we land in the Alaska of it all.
Yeah. And so then we go to Alaska, America's 49th state, And here's what I was doing while Sejan was talking. I was, in addition to listening, I was also looking up, because he lands in Juneau, Alaska. Juneau, Alaska famously cannot be approached by any roads. You have to either fly in or come in from the sea. So like, oh, he's landing in Juneau, Alaska. That's fine. And then you get to... Sorry. Nope, I got it. I found what I needed. And then they're like, all right, we're landing in Juneau, Alaska, and we will be soon reaching our final destination of Anchorage in Alaska in about 2 hours' time. In the meantime, here's a complimentary film while we finish landing. It is July. We are told that it is July. In fact, we are told that North has 8 more weeks until Labor Day, which is when he has to be in the arms of either his new parents or his original parents, or go to the terrible orphanage. Which, you know what, if they showed us the terrible orphanage, those would be stakes. But they don't, right? It's not like you'll have to stay in the orphanage until you leave for Texas, and just one night in the orphanage is enough for him to, like, realize, I need to find new fucking parents. Like, I can't do that again, right? No, right? There's no soap party in North, and there should be. But, so they land in an Alaska that is covered in snow. And then, once they land in Anchorage, and he does the whole, nice landing, fellas, to the pilots. Hey, thank you, North. Occasionally we dent the terminal, but we've gotten pretty good at it. Sejan, do you want to take a guess as to what the temperature is in Juneau, Alaska right now, where it is 4 p.m. in Alaska as we record this?
I will bet that it's higher than not, but the problem being that we are also talking about 20 years ago. Do we have that number? Because that would be the more important one.
It'd be the same. I wouldn't be asking this question if I wasn't in Alaska at this time in 1995 and like saw there's the fact that is that I've been to Alaska. I've traveled there for, cruise stuff and all that other things, right? So knowing that, what do you think the temperature is in Alaska right now as we record this on 8/16/24?
At 4 o'clock in the afternoon in a pretty northern part, I would venture maybe the 60s.
It is 67 degrees in Juneau, Alaska right now.
All right.
And it is 69 degrees in Anchorage, Alaska right now. They are acting like it is the dead of winter. That
they're also acting like it's the fucking Flintstones, and everything has to be an ice.
Thank God I'm not the only person who felt like it reminded me of the Flintstones movie. Sejan.
Everything is made out of ice. Everything's an igloo. Everything is a joke about wearing big puffy coats. Like everything, it feels like it is like a Flintstone-esque world. Only instead of Stone Age people, it's the Ice offensive Age. Stereotypes of indigenous peoples instead.
They're the modern Ice Age family. My favorite is the guy who's mowing the ice. I really respect, because he is using a lawn mower. That is an on-set decision. Like, and it's perfect. It's what I recall. But yeah, that's the moment where you're like, okay, so Texas was a bunch of stereotypes. Hawaii was a bunch of early Hawaiian stereotypes, not 1990 stereotypes about Hawaii, but oh, they're still everything's a luau and everything's a grass skirt. Also, pausing for station identification, what was up with all the Polynesian dancing that happened at my high school? Did you ever have to go to one of those?
I did not. I do know that there's a pretty active Polynesian community out here in Utah, and so I actually do see a lot of stuff like that out here that is making what strides it can to try and educate people about that stuff. I did not know that was something that happened in New England when I was a kid.
They would do it all the time. One of my senior year crushes, right? I'm like, oh, I finally noticed this girl, right? It's because we were working on a project together. I don't need to go into it. She would do big Polynesian dances with the grass skirts and the little clack things, and I'm just watching this movie. I'm like, huh, it's weird that what this triggers memory-wise for me is watching this type of dancing in the auditorium. And then, being the guy who had to run the lights and sounds for like Polynesian dance performances.
Sure. But there is something to be said about the idea of putting on displays like that in times of celebration and education
definitely.
and all of that, right? Like, that's one thing. We are led to believe that that is what Hawaii, quotes,
that's
around Hawaii
night.
is like 24/7.
Yeah. Every night is Polynesian dance. Also, shout out to the fact that Lauren Tom, you probably most recently heard her as Amy Wong in Futurama, but she's also like Khan Jr.'s mother in King of the Hill. And I love seeing Lauren Tom actually act in the Hawaii scene. I know that we're in Alaska now, but like I brought up the fact that she's a barren woman. And it feel like that ended the Hawaii conversation. And I'm sorry about that. Because there are some things to be celebrated there. Moving back to Alaska, where it's ice and snowy, even in the winter, where like...
And brownface.
Yeah, and brownface. Kathy Bates shows up in brownface. And Sejin said he doesn't know why she's in this movie. Like, she's acting completely out of character. I have the reason why she's there. Let me see if I can find it again. It's not too deep.
She owe Rob Reiner something after Misery?
Kathy Bates disliked the script initially and was also advised to turn the movie down by her agent. She only agreed to appear because she felt indebted to Rob Reiner as he had directed her to an Oscar-winning performance in Misery. She felt working with Reiner again was necessary as her way of saying thank you for Reiner's help in her winning the Oscar.
Let that be a lesson to y'all. You don't fucking owe anybody anything.
Actually, like, to go a little off the Sayerport Reservation into our Adam Sandler Museum, I'm fairly certain the advice that she gave to Adam Sandler is a direct result of her having been in this movie.
Which was, as a reminder to us
all. Oh my God. Basically, who gives a fuck what the critics say? Like, if you're coming in here, you're doing your best. At the end of the day, it's for you. It's not for them. And the fact that one of the reasons why North is remembered as such a terrible movie is because of just how, I'm going to call it toxic, but really it's negative, Roger Ebert's review of this film was.
Oh, we're going to get to that.
Okay,
that was going to be my nightcap on this
I love
episode.
It, and I want that.
Because, like, it becomes definitive in the world of film criticism, his criticism of this movie in particular.
Yeah. Which also, come to find out, and I want to say, he didn't like A Few Good Men? Go fuck yourself, Roger Ebert. How could you?
He does not have, We'll
get there. We will get to it, yeah. But yeah, so Kathy Bates, and it feeling like, what are you doing here, Kathy Bates? What is going on? It's because literally she is only there because she feels that there is a debt owed to the director of this film. She, like many others, read the script of this movie and was like, this is not a good, I don't think I want to be in this movie. And then and her agent was like, yeah, good, because you fucking shouldn't be. But then she shows up. And then also, Graham Greene is there. And Graham Greene, I love Graham Greene. I absolutely love him as an actor. So it's nice to see that they got someone of indigenous background to play one of the Alaskan parents. But then, here comes Abe Vigoda, making jokes about the fact that you think Daddy's dead as early as 1994.
Yeah. I know Graham Greene was Canadian, right? Because I know him from the fucking Red Green Show. I'm pretty sure that's like where I remember him as showing up on that show a lot, right? Am I misremembering who Graham Greene is? Like Graham Greene, there?
I mean, for me, it's Due South. He's one of the guys in Due South. I don't know if he's like the Mountie ghost that the guy sees, or let's look him up. Let's look up Graham Greene. He is referenced as being in Dances with Wolves. He's Kicking Bird. He's in Maverick. His top four known for is The Green Mile.
Not Top Gun Maverick, mind you. The 1994 Mel Gibson, we're doing the old TV show as a movie, Maverick.
Dude, this is the funniest thing I've ever said, and I know by saying that I ruined that. I see your Richie Rich, I raise you Maverick. Double feature episode. I
Hell
love
yeah.
Maverick. That movie's so good.
Maverick's all right. I mean, honestly, the reason that I don't go back to Maverick more often in my life nowadays, I honestly haven't in years, is the Mel Gibson of it all. Like, it really is just a hard movie to watch because it is like so much a Mel Gibson movie. Like,
yeah. So Graham Greene was in 27 episodes of the Red Green Show as Edgar K.B. Montrose.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then I'm fairly certain, I gotta see if he was in Due South or if he was the ferryman in Big Wolf on Campus. That's some Devon and Siege and stuff. Also proof that he's Canadian. Like, not that you needed more proof that he's Canadian, but if you're Canadian, you were in Big Wolf on Campus. It's just a fact of the matter. He was not in Due South, which now makes me sad, and now I gotta watch Due South as penance.
Yeah,
but he's great.
Yeah, so he is an indigenous actor that constantly shows up in these in roles in which movies or television shows want to try and depict this kind of character, and like it becomes kind of hard to watch him in North for me because of how much I understand that this is like a huge deal that he is somebody with this kind of background being able to actually make a career, like a successful career, and not always playing that kind of role, right? But then like this movie so much just wants to slot him into that space, and it's made all the more clear by bookending, putting on either side of him fucking Abe Vigoda and Kathy Bates
in brownface. Yeah.
Like, he deserved better than that.
He did deserve better than that. And he also, like, he doesn't really get, like, a goodbye scene. Like, North kind of has a goodbye scene with the other parents. And then he's just like, they make a terrible joke about, we have to walk grandfather to the ice floe because he's too old. And then they're like, yeah, you were working for 7 weeks. So you only have a week left until your deadline. And then what may be my favorite joke in the movie, oh, that's why we stopped for lunch 49 times. Like, oh my God. That's a good little joke. But also, like, this is where Richard Belzer shows up as, like, the guy welcoming the old people to be put on icebergs and drift out to sea until they die. And, like, what the fuck is Munch doing there, Siege?
Well, because Munch isn't everything. It's the 90s, dude. I was kind of surprised in that moment that wasn't Bruce Willis, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is weirdly the line in the sand in terms of morality in this particular film is like his problem. Like, that family is great. They whistled the Andy Griffith Show theme, the fishing hole song. And then that's a wonderful little moment. Like, everything seems to be good for North there until he realizes, like, just how heartless the parents can be. And that heartlessness, and again, it's not true, but, like, it is grounded more in, like, cultural beliefs, right? And I don't know if that's true or not. It was just something that was a big stereotype.
Well, right.
Like,
yeah, exactly. But this idea being that, again, to go back to the concept of in the world of this film, in the truth of this film, they aren't being heartless. This is what that culture does. Now, again, outside of that film, God, like, I'm not even gonna try and take a stab at guessing about how fucking accurate that shit is. It feels inaccurate, but fuck me, I don't know for sure, right? So, like, but even to live within the world of the movie, for him to take so much offense to a thing that they just do, to see it as an act of malice, is so unkind and so rude.
Yeah, it's like, to the fact that they don't even get a goodbye, right? He's like, take me to the airport, I need to fucking go. But then, like, there's the one other thing about what you just said, and, like, he views it, and the whole, I think, they are a little heartless, though. Because the grandfather who goes to before Abe Vigoda Grandpa, he gets a lazy boy and a TV. Abe Vigoda Grandpa gets a fucking stool. He gets a wooden stool to sit on that ice floe. And then he also gets like...
Also, that could be a... But that could be a matter of, privilege and all of that. Like, if that is to them what they have,
that's true.
It's just like, a fucking weird moment. It's a weird moment. I'm having such a hard time getting past the idea that, like, this entire scene is just offensive to me.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so, like,
it is.
I don't enjoy the moments that you're talking about being like interesting and worth talking about, I don't.
Because it's not even worth it
Yeah,
because of the central crux of it. And I understand that. So, I mean, I guess the last thing I will say, though, is that, like, they do kind of twist the knife where he's like, if our culture changes, feel free to come look for me. What? Did you say something? It's like, oh, God. Like, and, like, again, they do so much tell, don't show, because apparently for that 7-week trek, like, North bonded with this grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have any real evidence of that.
Right.
It's just,
yeah.
It's crazy. And then we go to the Amish scene, which is my line of, who the fuck was this movie made for? Because it is an Amish family. It is Alexander Goodenough, who you probably know as the blonde guy who's mad his brother died in Die Hard, also featuring Bruce Willis. Also, rest in peace, Alexander Goodenough. You're a hell of an actor. And this was his last film. So if there's ever a moment where, like, we're going to pay the Say Report respects to Alexander Goodenough, is going to be him showing up in a cameo in North alongside Kelly McGillis, because the two of them played Amish people in Witness starring Harrison Ford.
Yeah, that's the bit, right? Yeah.
Like, I see him and I'm like, is that Alexander Goodenough? Yeah, that's Alexander Goodenough. And then it's the fact that, like, I'm like, or is it the guy in Funny People who, like, he jokes about looking like Alexander Goodenough because, like, they could be that too. I didn't know when Alexander Goodenough passed away. Confirmed that this was his last film. And, like, and then Kelly McGillis is the mom, the Amish mom. And North goes, oh, I just forgot my butter churn. And he's like, let's get the fuck out of here to the pilots. And the plane, like, immediately just takes off in, like, the biggest waste of CGI ever. Just straight up. I've never watched a movie, ever. I've never looked at a movie and been like, that was a waste of computer-generated imagery. Until I watched North today and was like, what the fuck was that? That was
at which
unnecessary.
Point we roll into the into the montage of
that's
the international
stuff, right?
montage.
And then he comes back to the Nelsons, who are Ward, Laura, Bud, and I don't remember the mom's name. And I feel bad because I know it's Faith Ford. And Donna. Ward, Donna, Laura, and Bud Nelson. And they are like the perfect sitcom family. To the fact that that's the other person that I was trying to think of. They tried to get Suzanne Summers to be the mother, but she couldn't get out of her step-by-step contract to film this, to film what would have been like, 3 scenes in this movie? Like, and I know that, like, it's more work than that, right? It's that you don't just show up for one day for it. But, like, it would have been awesome if it had been Suzanne Summers and John Ritter, and you got the threes.
There's also something that makes you kind of scratch your head and go, was that just a convenient excuse from Suzanne Summers to say, no?
Yeah. I don't know. I read the script, and no, thank you. Yeah, it's crazy. But, like, I love John Ritter. I absolutely love John Ritter. The only better person to be his wife than Faith Ford would have been Amy Yazbek, because of them being together in the Problem Child films, and then him playing her ex-husband in Wings, and that being where they started their relationship. They were so devoted to each other until he passed away. Again, like, we've paid respect to John Ritter before, but, like, also weird to watch this movie and think of just, like, all the people who are dead now who were in North. I mean,
that's going to happen as you watch movies later and later.
I know,
the further we get away from 1994.
Yeah, I understand it, but it's just one of those situations where, like, that's the thing I'm noticing. I mean, this is the only film that Phil Hartman's wife and murderer shows up in. So, like, that's just the thing to think. She's the waitress. Bryn Hartman plays a waitress at some point. I don't know where, but it's a thing that happens. But yeah, like, and then he goes to them, and they're like the stereotypical family, and then it's all subtext, the fact that, like, North is jealous that he wouldn't be an only child here, that he'd have to fight for the affection of his parents, which again sort of shows how myopic North is about what your parents are, right? Because, like, you shouldn't have to fight for it. Like, your parents should love you no matter what. You shouldn't have to feel like you're fighting for their affection. And, like, I don't know. It's I feel it's a weird little fucking thing. And then he wakes up. Well, then he almost gets killed. And Jesse Smollett's like, I got the video of the real thing that your parents said. They do miss you. They want you back. And that whole scene is ADR. So I wonder what they fucking talked about the real time. Maybe I got to watch your version of the movie to see what they discuss underneath the bridge from John Wick. It's not really. It's just a park in New York City. So it was a fun little reference to make.
So did you got... So yeah, now I'm wondering what you saw and didn't see, because like he has that whole revelation of the fact that they actually like him with Joey Fingers, right?
With Joey Fingers, the best Bruce Willis, because he's Bruno. Like, I know we don't talk about Bruno, and that's a different Bruno than from Encanto. Someday I'll track down the album. I have the album on cassette.
Someday we'll go honking on Bruno.
Oh, I fucking hate you so much. My stomach is doing flip-flops. So Joey Fingers, and he's like, all I did whenever there was a VCR in this movie, and I know that I'm a fucking asshole for doing this, I referenced the scene in the 3rd episode of the Ted television show where they go to the AV club to get fake IDs, and Ted goes, we have that same VCR at home. And the guy selling the idea goes, I don't fucking care. But then it's like a Chekhov's VCR, because they end up breaking their VCR and they switch it out. Every VCR I saw in this movie, and I was watching this movie alone. I was alone in the house watching this movie. Every VCR they showed, I said, oh, we have that same VCR at home. And then I'd go, I don't fucking care.
I thought you were going to say what I was saying every time I saw a VCR in this movie, and I was like, I bet you Bruce Willis left a copy of Hudson Hawk in that.
Oh, god damn it.
Oh, man.
Elijah Wood's favorite game is Super Mario Brothers 3, which is he was at the Wizard at the Super Mario Brothers 3 thing. So that felt like a fun little reference from me. Do you like video games?
That's the other thing, is that this movie is also kind of masturbatory in so many places, right? Where like it wants you to laugh at the joke that the person on screen is somebody that's worked with Rob Reiner before. The joke on screen is, oh, this is a reference to another Elijah Wood moment. The joke on screen is, oh, this is John Ritter playing like a sitcom, like Perfect Father, right? Like there's this weird kind of level of which it just kind of wants you to like, it can't be funny on its own, so it wants the world to pick up the difference.
Yeah, like it's like, come on, Alexander Goodenough and Kelly McGillis. That's just funny. And it's like, is it funny? Like, I noticed it, but as a kid, I didn't notice it. And as an adult, I noticed it. And all I could think was, that was fucking weird.
Well, like, and it's funny. It's like that kind of stuff can be funny as an aside. That can't be the bit.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Right.
Like it's wild. So, is there anything else that you want to say about this movie before we talk about what Roger Ebert had to say?
No. I'm trying to think. I just want to make sure that we covered that arcade is incredible. While I took away the Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa because it was literally a game I thought I dreamt of, and then a movie existed where I could be like, it fucking exists, Ma! It fucking happened! I was not drunk on Bourbon Street at 7. That was nice, but then there's also Turtles in Time shows up there, which is incredible. A Nintendo NES Play Choice 10 is there. Terminator 2 with the guns, right? Judgment Day. 2 pinball machines, including Bally's Black Rose, which is excellent. NBA Jam, and we have this up on our Facebook page because I talked about it, and someone's like, I don't believe it's real. You can look at North and be like, it's fucking real. The Super Nintendo version of the Play Choice, playing Super Tennis of all things. Though I do also like that on Winchell's wall of TVs, one of them is playing the final boss fight from Super Mario World. Because of course it fucking is. Like, what the fuck is this movie? North is You're a mean one. So, yeah, I think that's everything. So, talk to me about Roger Ebert. He should avoid the fatty foods, to quote South Park. Oh, that's the last thing. Mark Scheinman plays the piano player and did the music for this movie. 5 years later, he's writing Uncle Fucker with Matt and Trey for Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. And because of the strike, we couldn't do Alfred Packer the musical. But keep an eye out for another double feature come 1995. That's all I can say.
We'll Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that this is one of those rare films in 1994 that is critically panned and also bombs, right? It makes like something like 20 million on a 40 million dollar budget. It just does not work, right? And so in wrapped up in a lot of that is this is also the era of like of Ebert, right? It's what is it's not Ebert and Roper at the time. It's
Siskel and
Siskel and
Ebert.
Ebert, right?
Yep.
Right.
At the movies.
And like and Siskel and Ebert at the movies, right? The critic, like we get just to go back to the John Lovitz of it all, right? We get Jay Sherman like in this era, right?
They're gonna make me president.
The ways in which Roger Ebert kind of shaped film criticism at the time in the 90s and then reshapes it in the year 2000 2001 where on the Say Report we often talk about there's this shift in cinema. I lean a lot on the fact that like 9/11 really kind of affects a lot of stuff, but I think that actually what we're about to talk about is going to show that it was kind of already in the water, right? And that is the cynicism of film criticism that leaks from the artistic jerks that are sitting in theaters that are like, you know, I'll only watch David Lynch films and like I will be the one that masturbates to Crash, like that kind of shit, like those assholes who have always been cynics. It starts to bleed into the day-to-day cinema viewer like us, right? And the through line, the real true connection to that is kind of Roger Ebert. He brings that kind of artsy film criticism into the home with Siskel and Ebert, right? Like that's where this kind of starts to come in, where everybody gets to get a little bit of a film degree by watching these guys talk about these movies, right? And in the year 2000, he puts out the book I hated this movie. And that is a direct reference. The title of that book is a direct reference to his criticism of North. It is a quote from his criticism of North that I'm going to talk about here in a second. But in that book, he collects something like 100, or it might even be like 200, like different film criticisms that he's written over the years of movies he's hated. Notably, just because we've already talked about it this episode, we love talking about it on the show. The very first book in the book, because it's alphabetical, is fucking Ace Ventura. Right? And like, it becomes kind of this, in the moment when it comes out in 2000, this collection of essays, essentially, of him criticizing all of these films that he despised, kind of becomes the background of a lot of film critique for a lot of armchair critics like us, right? Like, if we were doing this podcast in the year 2000, I will openly admit, I no doubt would have had that book in my repertoire on my bookshelf as part of what made me the kind of person, because I mean, it did make me that kind of person today, because I had to read it for school, for film classes. I had to look at certain things in that and talk about it. And people still to this day reference that book. And that book is a direct reference back to this movie. Right? And Roger Ebert kind of being this through line of how we view cinema and how people kind of learned to parse out like art from entertainment, and like the ways in which we're still kind of struggling in the aftermath of that whole conversation. And this is not, I don't want to blame Roger Ebert for this, because like I actually very much respect the man for a lot of the things that he did for cinema and a lot of the things that he did for educating people about cinema and things like that. Like I think these were all necessary evils, I guess would be the best way to put it.
It's an interesting thing to say, but he is one of the most gatekeepery people regarding the art of cinema and art in general, and it's just
he guarded the gate for sure. Yeah, I know, a huge gatekeeper, but his belief was he could elevate you to the level where you were allowed in, as opposed to gatekeeping that happens most of the time, where somebody says you're not allowed in, and I'm going to make sure you never make it in. Still not good, still bad. It's just the other side of the coin, right? And that's where I'm saying that this book is a very, very good distillation of the necessary evil that I feel he kind of brought into this world. Because at the end of the day, this is just also the way that sometimes people feel about movies. And like, we shouldn't ignore the fact that sometimes people don't like things, because that's also a problem. Gatekeeping with a smile on your face is still fucking gatekeeping.
Agreed.
If you're telling somebody that they're not allowed to be negative about a thing, that you're just as bad as somebody saying you're not allowed to be positive about a thing. We just have to figure out the language where we can all kind of talk together. And we're bad at that. We're just bad at that. And this book is an unfortunate example of a lot of really bad language, right? And so to talk specifically about his review of North, right? Some of the choice quotes to come from his North review, like right off the bat, he says, North is one of the most unpleasant, contrived, artificial, cloying experiences I've had at the movies. To call it manipulative would be inaccurate. It has an ambition to manipulate, but fails. Which is
Jesus.
like kind of some of the stuff that I was saying at the beginning of this. Like, it wants to be something, but it never quite lands as it. It wants to be a comedy, but it's never quite funny. It wants to be this family movie, but it's kind of weirdly offensive, too offensive even at the time, right? It wants to be a kids movie, but it's too weird to be a kids movie, and it wants to be an adult movie, but it's too dumb to be an adult movie. Like, it can't quite figure out where it wants to land, right? It has ambition, but it fails, I think, is a fantastic way to kind of like pin this movie down, right? He does then go on to talk about how like he knows Elijah Wood is a good actor. He has seen Elijah Wood do good work up to this point. He doesn't understand what's going on with this movie. He talks about Rob Reiner, and he lists the fact that like he loves Reiner films. He holds in great esteem films like what are the ones that he lists here? He lists Spinal Tap. He lists When Harry Met Sally. He lists The Princess Bride, Misery, right? He talks about those movies. Stand By Me. He says, these are good movies that I've come from Rob Reiner that I like. So I have to believe that this is just a misstep in an otherwise pretty phenomenal career, right? And like, so he openly talks about that. But here, this is the quote. This is the one that leads it all off. I hated this movie. Hated this movie. Hated it. Hated every simpering, stupid, vacant, audience-insulting moment of it. Hated the sensibility that the thought that anyone would like it. Hated the implied insult to the audience by its belief that anyone would be entertained by it. That it's the paragraph, and that becomes the story of this movie going forward in film history. This movie becomes just a box office bomb, a critical miss, and that becomes the history of North. To Devin's point, did you say this to me on air? I'm gonna call you out if you didn't. But at the end of the day, you kind of like this movie, right?
I like this film. I've said it. Yeah. It was the second thing I wanted to make sure I put on paper is that like I can admit that it is literally 87 minutes of stereotypes. 87 minutes of negative stereotypes.
But this is the inevitable thing that happens with these movies that get stuck in this whirlpool of both critical, failure and box office failure, which is a whole other fucking thing, because as we've talked about nowadays, we look at movies like Black Adam, where supposedly it was a box office failure until you find out that it actually made way more than its budget back, but because of the story at the time that we were being told, everybody is just going to forever believe that it was a box office bomb, right? But that's just not true, right? Not the case with North. North was definitively a box office bomb, right? But this idea that like there is a movie that gets put out there that people just rip to shreds, and then at some point you come to it, right? Whether it's this movie, I think I was just reading somebody talking about this with New Mutants, right? The forgotten X-Men film that didn't even get brought up in Deadpool Wolverine. Like, so like the exact point I saw somebody trying to make was that because Deadpool Wolverine didn't reference New Mutants, it must mean that Disney is going to do more with those characters.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm so sorry, but that's not what that means.
And you should drink a gallon of my piss because it tastes like chocolate milk.
There's this idea that you hear about these kinds of movies that are just so disliked, hated, and then you sit down and you watch them. You give those kinds of movies the time and the effort, and suddenly you realize, I don't understand why this movie's hated. It's not a great movie, but this is not the worst thing I've ever put in front of my eyeballs, right?
It's a movie.
I do think that is
like that's a big judgment here. Is that like it's a movie? I've seen movies that are not movies. Like this.
I think that's where North falls in the grand scheme of things. Because of the history at the time, because of the ways that the people that were writing the books, because of the gatekeeping that we see on display by somebody like Roger Ebert, this movie will forever go down as one of the quote-unquote worst movies ever made until you watch it. And this kind of bleeds into some of the stuff we were saying about Deadpool Wolverine. Because I was saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth if you don't want them, Dev, but like this idea that we as audience members are so averse to admitting that we like a thing that other people don't, that it just kind of snowballs and things are just getting fucking pushed to the side and forgotten, and nothing's being given a chance to get air anymore. Whereas like Deadpool Wolverine really felt like there was a lot of celebration in that movie of these so successful but still enjoyable film franchises. Blade, Elektra. I mean, a lot of the X-Men movies, like as much as we want to talk about how great like Hugh Jackman is as Wolverine, and a lot of the movies that he's been in specifically have been the good ones. A couple of the ones he's been in have not. Some of them have been considered some of the worst.
Last Stand, Origins Wolverine.
Right.
Like,
I mean, even to that point,
Past.
X-Men 3 is like X-Men 3 is not really held in high regard.
Well, that's Last Stand. That was the first one that I led
with.
Oh,
sorry. No, I thought we were talking about like not Dark Phoenix, or what's the other one?
Age of Apocalypse.
Rise of Apocalypse. What's the one that he comes back in one of those ones,
that's
right?
Days of Future Past.
Days of Future Past. Jesus. Yeah, my God, so many freaking X-Men movies. And so many of them bleed together and become forgettable to me. But like that idea, right? That Deadpool Wolverine, one of the most successful, if not the most successful film, right? Like in the year 2024, right?
The most successful R-rated film, and it joined the $1 billion club. Like those are things that are undeniable about the film. So.
And it is a movie that openly celebrates these mundane, middling film franchises that still found their audiences. And like movies like North were kind of never had a chance because of the ways in which the criticism kind of worked against them, right? And that's just happening to just everything now. The second that the whisper of a film comes out, we have decided how we feel about it, and if that feeling is negative, that movie doesn't stand a fucking chance. It's so unfortunate that like we aren't ever gonna get another film like North. As somebody that sat here for the last 2 hours and talked nothing but shit about that movie, and I do not enjoy it nearly as much as Devin has openly admitted to enjoying it, that's okay. I still think there's something really interesting being put on film here that I am glad exists on film. Because then we get the opportunity for us to sit here and do this 30 years later. And talk about this, and talk about the ways in which Roger Ebert saw this movie. It affected him so much that 6 years later, he puts out one of the most important books of his career. He's put out a few that are big, but like one of the ones that is like still talked about in film classes that I took, at least. Like there is a way in which this movie existing affected the ways in which we watch other movies, and like that wouldn't have happened if this movie didn't get the chance to be seen by people.
It's so interesting to me. First of all, and that's why with the Deadpool Wolverine of it all, and we just talked about it in the episode prior to recording this time capsule episode. So I am beating a drum that I have already beaten. I was excited because I thought it meant that Disney was going to do that again. When really it was like, this is the last time you're going to fucking see it, because here's Robert Downey Jr. coming back to play Doctor Doom. Right? It's why I couldn't talk about it. Because you're right, that celebration in that film renewed my interest in Marvel films. Because if we're just going to have fucking fun again, then I'm on board. And to go to your, like, once a film is heard about, I was talking with some people and I asked about Alien Romulus, and there were people there who didn't know that it was coming out. Like, marketing films, so much of it now feels like, especially the freaking Crow comes out next Friday, right? And that's a big deal.
Come out.
Right, exactly. The freaking Crow movie comes out next Friday. That's a big deal because we're going to be looking at the Crow film from the 90s as another very special episode, right? That's where we're announcing it. Maybe it's already happened, maybe whatever. But like I didn't know that the Crow film was coming out because part of marketing,
in my mind, it had come out and been panned and was
gone.
Ran tail and hid, right? Like I didn't realize it had to come out yet. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's completely fine. Because right now, after all the time that we've complained about how movies are advertised, right? With things like The Sejan's Gambit, where they're showing you the ending in the trailers, what it seems like they're doing now is trying to keep movies super under wraps until the week before they come out. So there's no chance of the Katamari Damacy ball of that film picking up any negative press to keep people from going to the theater that one weekend. Right?
I mean, look at everything that's going on in this really, like, a really weird offshoot of this, because we've talked about Deadpool Wolverine. Why not talk about Blake Lively's new movie? Like, It Ends With Us, right? Which is this really weird, dark thriller romance that has a lot of its own issues with it. We're not going to get into today because I could talk for a whole episode just about that.
Me too. And
but they took the A24 method approach to it, where they spent as little money as possible making it. I think like $25 million, and it's made $150 million or something like that now. Like $200 million maybe by the time this comes out, maybe more. Like there is so much money being made by it. It's not billions, but it's more than it costs to make, and like way more than it costs to make. So they get to kind of sit on that like success and talk about percentage wise being one of the more successful films of 2024, which is a hell of a thing to be able to say right now, right? But critically, it's not doing great because there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes and all that sort of stuff.
What I was gonna say, it's a step in here. Apologies. Why is everyone mad at Blake Lively is an article that came up while I was looking for other things during this episode, and I intend to read it after the episode. I don't need to do it now, but the byline is on her It Ends With Us interview circuit. Blake Lively can't act like someone concerned with domestic violence. So like the film's not without controversy, but on Entertainment Tonight last night, right? So on 8/15/24, and I don't usually watch it, but I had hunkered down at a bar because the thunderstorms were that bad. And I just sat at a bar, and they happened to have Entertainment Tonight on, and they're already talking about doing the sequel to It Ends With Us. It starts with us as a film off of the success of this film. So, like, even though there's, like, negative things going there, critics are like, this is a really mixed message. I mean, to be fair, literary critics had been saying that already, so it's just more of the same.
Right.
But, like, that's where they're at, where they're like, yeah, but we're ready to make the sequel right now while the iron is hot. And
there's this weird kind of level to it where, like, they very much kind of... If you were in the circles, if you were in the literary circles, if you were in the romance story circles, you kind of knew this was coming. Outside of that, this is a pretty small film. And it's like, because they kind of kept it so close to the vest, put this thing out kind of in the shadow of Reynolds' project that she is also in, we should mention, right? Like there's this whole like moment of Blake Lively showing up there that is pretty cool in that movie, right? And there's this whole idea that like it kind of snuck in under the radar, but in doing that is now able to kind of use all of this weird negative press in the other direction to be kind of weirdly successful in that way. And like it's kind of like that's just to kind of the conversation that you were having about like marketing and them like not wanting to talk about movies anymore, not wanting to, because a movie pokes its head out for a second and it just gets fucking like whacked, like
ripped apart.
So instead, keep it to yourself, and then if things do go sideways, you use that in the marketing. I have no doubt in my mind that any article out there that is talking about how Blake Lively is the one to blame in these situations. First of all, if you read much about the situations, I don't know how much truth there truly is to that. But if you want to go that direction with it, I bet there's a few of them that are actually being put out by her people on her side at least, who just are using that kind of clickbaity nonsense to get you to pay attention to this film. And it's working.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. It's all weirdly viral marketing that is being successful, that is helping movies find success now. So the fact that somebody, pretty big Alien fan, was like, there's a new Alien movie coming out, and I'm like, so when's the last time you went to the theater? And they're like, I haven't gone. I haven't gone at all in 2024. And I'm like, okay, so that tracks. Because I saw my first trailer for Romulus before Twisters, which, as of this recording, is available to watch at home. Mostly saying that for Sejin if he wants to hunt it down so we can have a truly in-depth discussion about Twisters. And you, the listener, you'll know if that happened or not, huh? This is my favorite place to be. I just need to make sure everybody knows that. But before Twisters is the first time I saw that trailer, and I'm like, fuck, how many movies do I need to watch in order for this one to make perfect sense to me? Because the trailer for Romulus is so good that like that's where I'm at with it. But I'm just gonna wait and watch it at home. I'm not gonna go to theater for it because the big issue with Deadpool Wolverine, and now this is like a real episode of the show. We should get back to it because I do have something important to say about the Roger Ebert of it all that is very interesting to me. But like Deadpool Wolverine is the only thing that's in laser projection. So there have been movies that have come out that I want to see that I'm like, I'm not going to sit in a theater that is not bigger than my living room. I'm not going to do it. It's not worth it.
We had Deadpool Wolverine. We had a couple of theaters that moved to Borderlands, and now they're all back to Deadpool Wolverine. That's what's going on out here.
I couldn't find a single one.
IMAX laser projection of it all.
Yeah, it's just like that. Like I wanted to see Trap, but I didn't because it would have been in a small theater. Borderlands would have been in a smaller theater. And like I used to be the guy who would go out to the screening room at the Bowtie Criterion Cinema in New Haven to watch movies. And that was like literally smaller than my living room. 4 rows of 7 seats each. And like, it was cool to see certain movies in there. But like now it's not worth it. Right? Yeah. Post-COVID and what films are, it's not worth making that trek. And even then, at that same theater, like a film like Wild Tales, which if you've never seen Wild Tales, this is to Siegen and to everybody, seek it out. That movie is visceral and electric. I love that fucking movie. It's a Spanish language film. So maybe our Cuban cinema class instilled a little bit of love for me to appreciate it. But also, I mean, just the opening of that movie, friggin' mind-blowing cinema. And I think that's from like 2016, 2017. All I know is that I saw it was playing on the TV and I taped it on the DVR and it was the Spanish language version. And I'm like, I could watch this, but my family's not going to watch the Spanish language version of this film. I feel bad. Like, thanks, Cuba Cinema class. But the thing I want to get back to about the Roger Ebert of it all is that is so interesting to me that one of your required readings was I hated this movie.
Not like the whole book, but like selected.
But
like,
from it,
like we're gonna
I mean,
talk
all
about
of my
criticism.
film courses were like understanding movies, and some other one like the screenwriter's book and things like that. So that was never in any of my film class curriculums. But then the book that I chose to read of my own volition was Richard Roper's Hollywood Urban Legends. And just looking at the Say report, I wasn't expecting like deep-seated origin stuff to come out in a time capsule episode, but hey, here we are. Me reading that book while you were reading excerpts of the Roger Ebert book in the generation where he became an even bigger bad guy. Because the thing about when he was with Gene Siskel, first of all, I will go on record again, I hate Gene Siskel, but I only hate Gene Siskel because his favorite movie was Saturday Night Fever. A film that I will be watching before the end of the year. Maybe I've already watched it again and talked about it. Because
Isn't Siskel the one though that wrote that really weird whole like expose about like tits on screen.
Tits in movies.
Need more tits on screen.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, right? But like it was this weird thing where like they were both kind of gross people in some ways. Like part of the fun of watching their show was watching these two guys fight about movies. And like a la like Seinfeld, like you're watching like bad people have this fight and this discussion, right?
Who clearly don't like each other.
Yeah. They clearly don't like each other. And then like you clearly as a viewer, I mean I can't speak for everybody, like you're like, yeah, they're not the kind of people I'd want to get a beer with, right? To resurrect that old chestnut of like how to judge a good person. But when Richard Roper took over for Gene Siskel after he passed away, he brought a weird positive energy to At the Movies that like Ebert's response, and it might not have just been his response, it could have literally been a producer being like, if he's going to be the happy guy, you need to be the fucking misanthrope. You need to be the fucking asshole.
Yeah.
So part of the thing behind I hated that movie was the fact that like that was the thing he was already doing, but he was kind of in his anti-hero phase. I wouldn't necessarily call him a villain, though. You know what? I would call him a villain because the fact that like video games can't be art the same way cinema is art. Like, go fuck yourself. I know the guy's dead, but still, like, what a weird. Like, we talk about gatekeepery stuff. I don't think we want video games to exist in the same friggin' like landscape of cinema, but can you admit that they're capable of telling stories? And this is me saying that, a guy who like historically is bogged down by stories.
I do think at some point towards the end of his life, he did talk about regretting like not seeing what you know, the forest for the trees or something like that. But yeah, I totally agree. No, I mean 100%. Like that's what I was saying, is that he kind of guided this weird sensibility of how we viewed movies throughout our whole lives.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that his choice at the end of the 90s, the 2000s, is, as you said, is to go full on villain mode. And that's kind of bled into how everybody now sees movies, right? And like North becomes this distillation of that version of him. So much so that is what the name of his book is.
Right. And to think that it's technically like 6 years before he goes full on villain. Right? It's like, so he always had these tendencies, but then like if we just focused the microscope on 200 of his essays about movies he hated, right, in this book, and then also on the show, he's like insulting Roper for being like, well, you know, it wasn't perfect, but I did enjoy this part of it. And he's like, how could you even enjoy that part of it with everything else that was going on? Like,
when did he write, or did he write Your Movie Sucks, or is that a movie written about him? I know that it's about Roger Ebert. I'm trying to remember.
Your Movie Sucks is by Roger Ebert.
Right, yeah. So that's just another one to throw on the table, right? Like that is just kind of what his attitude became.
Yeah, that's it. This new collection continues the tradition of I hated the movie, reviewing not only movies that were at the bottom of the barrel, but also movies that he found underneath the barrel. Jesus, sorry. Yeah. It's who he became. And like to look at the photo of him on the cover of Your Movie Sucks, like he looks like a Bond villain. He doesn't look like kind of happy guy who like was the mayor in Godzilla. I don't freaking know. It is this weird thing, and this movie does become that distillation of it. I think we've moved away from it. So the final thing I want to talk about is Bruce Willis, right? We've praised Bruce Willis' work in this, and the only reason he's in this movie is because his wife at the time, Demi Moore, was like, you have a chance to work with Rob, you should do it. Because working with him on A Few Good Men, I would never trade in that experience. Like, if he wants you in the movie, Bruce, honey, you should do it. And it's not just because I'm now hooking up with Ashton Kutcher. That's not for 5 more years.
Oh, man. Yeah, I also, you know, I will openly admit that a lot of my celebration of Bruce Willis in this film is coming from a place right now of knowing that we're just probably never going to get anything else from him, right? Like even though he is still with us, he is not in the capacity to do this kind of stuff anymore. And like, so I'll take anything I can get basically at this point. And he is fun to watch in this movie. He is legitimately fun to watch in this movie.
I mean, and the best part about it, right? If you're still on the fence about North, here's a fun way to watch North. Think of Bruce Willis as all of the movie characters he's been since North. It's fun to imagine that maybe he's a ghost that only North can see. It's fun to imagine that he's North from the future, guiding North on the proper path. It's also fun to think of him as North from the future, and North refuses to kill him, thus getting North killed. But it is this really interesting, like weirdly, it's like this film became the archetype for a bunch of other characters that Bruce Willis went on to go play.
He's trying to show North how to find surrogate parents, right?
Oh my God, right? This freaking guy, right? If you don't find surrogate parents, then not only are you going to die hard or die harder, you'll die hard with a vengeance. It'll be Armageddon, North, unless you realize.
Okay.
I know, I'm sorry. That one was a cop-out. Yeah. All right. No. So Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this time capsule episode of the Say Report. We didn't put it up at the beginning because I rambled about Rob Reiner. That's what I woke up with in my head this morning, and then you got me trying to remember it. So it was much better this morning. Sorry you couldn't hear it then. But these time capsule episodes, we put them together so that we have something in case we're unable to record and we don't want to miss a Monday. So thank you so much for being part of that tradition of us having something come up when we're supposed to record and instead slotting in one of these time capsule episodes. If a time capsule episode releases, that does mean that the Say Report is still live and active, and that also means that there's a Discord that you can join to engage in the conversation. I am telling you for a fact that we have put up the version of North that Siegen found on YouTube that weirdly has the ending Rob Reiner said destroys the point of this movie. I don't know where we got it from. Siegen, I am more and more believing that we are retrieving media from other dimensions.
I mean, I think part of it is that because of where this movie exists in the grand scheme of things, with everything we've talked about, that nobody cared to keep it under wraps.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know. It's just watching that scene in the middle of this was insane to me. Completely, it didn't change the film for the better, but it definitely answered some of my questions that I had, which was crazy. So join us in the Discord. You can see that there. You can have a conversation with us about North, and we'll answer you. You can get invites on our Facebook page or on X, formerly Twitter. Our profiles have an invite right there. Or you can always email us, thesayreport@gmail.com, and we will send an invite straight to you. Also, if you just want to talk to us via email, you're old school like that, right? It's very in the now right now to just send emails to go back to a simpler time on the internet. You can also send that to thesayreport@gmail.com. And if it's just for myself, Devin, or him, Siegen, make sure you put our name in the subject line, and our non-existent intern will distribute it appropriately. With that in mind, Siegen, anything else you want to say to the people before we send this one off?
If you got it in you to brave this movie, go watch this movie. I will say that. Like, it is definitely one of those ones that I won't classify it as like a dangerous banger or anything like that, because I do think that you're going to walk away from it being like, man, I don't know what the fuck was happening in that movie. But like, if you're the kind of person that is looking for that kind of experience, and I know that those people are out there in the world, like this is one that I'd recommend up there. This is one that I would say, do it.
Yeah, especially if you like Rob Reiner. But with that in mind, William, please bring us home. Have a great one, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Siegen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.